All right, so let's get the party started then, I guess. So I will call the Board of Selectmen joint meeting with the FinCom for February 20th, 2021. And we'll start with a roll call for attendance. Sean Farrell is present. Darcy?
Darcy Dale here.
Rosie?
Rosie Kennedy here.
Bill?
William Olson here. Good morning.
And Jamie?
Jamie Knudsen here.
All right, John, you want to call your meeting to order?
And I'll call to order the Finance and Advisory Committee. Take a roll call vote. John Prulidge here.
Christina Schenk-Hargrove here.
Valerie McCormick here.
Nick, you're on mute.
Sorry. I'm on Nick Tenson here.
All right.
All right, so this morning we've got first up on our docket is the budget and capital presentation by our town manager, Joe. Joe, you want to kick it off for us?
Please, yes. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We have some of our department heads here, and you'll all see Marissa smiling in her little window. Marissa and Diane are here too, because Marissa helped a lot with this budget, and Diane is going to be kind of taking over from here. So they'll be here to help answer specific questions. Before we get started, I just wanted to make a couple announcements. If it's all right with everybody, I'm going to ask everybody to mute because there's a lot of people here. I'm going to ask you to wait for questions till kind of the end of the presentation. But as you have questions, if you want to put a note in chats to Pat will be managing the list, and we'll recognize people in the order they asked to be recognized, so to make it a little bit more orderly on the questions part. And that'll help too when we get to the department head part of this a little bit later. Also, just in case people didn't get the notification through Code Red, Code Red had give us a little bit of trouble this morning, but we have a surprise vaccine clinic tomorrow with about 170 doses available. That's 100 doses of the town and 70 doses from Conley's Pharmacy. They've already started signing up, and I think we've already got the town doses spoken for. That's how quick it went. So we put the word out at 8 o'clock on social media, and I just saw a note from Rachel saying to take down the town's sign up sheet because it's already full. So now they're filling the Conley's doses. So good news. Was a bit of a surprise, but that's why we keep working regionally with our partners and trying to make things happen for us, for our residents. So we're going to put that aside and start with the presentation. I'll put it up here. I'm going to hope that we can get this to, there we go. How do I, Pat, if you're there, do you want to tell me how I get rid of everything, the sides here? Here we go. Here we go. All right. So thanks everybody for being here today. I've made notes for myself, so excuse me for reading, but we'll jump right into things here.
And Joe, sorry to interrupt you, but before you get going on it, can you work on blowing that screen up a little bit, because we are going to get into some numbers here, and we could see more of it for us old folks with bad eyes.
Yeah. Okay. How do I?
So Joe, if you go down to the bottom of the screen, next to the
there's a little bar.
This one here?
Slider. Yeah.
Yep.
Perfect.
Okay. Is that better? If I need to go up a little more, let me know. Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody. All right. So this is the budget presentation today is not a final, but it is the result of efforts of many people, including our town department heads, the Finance and Advisory Committee, the Capital Committee. I want to especially recognize Marissa and Diane, who are both here today to assist with specific questions. The next key components of the budget this year. When I say that the budget isn't final, that's partly because there are some elements of the budget that may change here in the next few weeks, as well as obviously the Select Board and FinCom will have their opportunities to comment on and affect the budget. So some of the key things that we're still waiting on information are from the final school department request assessment to Hamilton. We're still determining how we're going to allot payment for the various things that have been recommended in the capital program. And we have things like health insurance and liability insurance costs that are just estimates. We don't have the actual numbers from the insurers just yet, as well as the assessments from the town of Wenham for state programs. The two main budget goals that we took into this budget season was to maintain or improve services to residents without having an override. and to recognize that the town is still dealing with a worldwide pandemic and the economic and social pressure that creates. Excuse the typo. The budget presented here today recommends a total of $35,757,328 in spending for town and school operations, water operations, debt service, capital purchases, and appropriations to stabilization funds. This is an increase of just under $1 million over the current year budget and would require a Proposition 2.5 override if nothing changes. That would be in the amount of about $192,000. However, I'd like to note that the current projected increase in the regional school district assessment to the town is about $1.2 million. So the town side spending plan is actually about $250,000 less than the current year. Town operating budget factors. Though we have lowered the town's overall spending by almost $250,000, we were able to return some necessary operational funding that was cut from the current year's budget, such as seasonal help in the DPW, return of custodial services in the town hall building, and we've added some things like a police cruiser lease payment and a fire squad truck payment. There are a number of others, but those are just some examples. These are things that we cut out last year because we are anticipating kind of a revenue crisis because of the pandemic and the recession that followed it, and we do believe that those were things that were cut out because they needed to be at the time, but they're really things that we need to regularly operate in a responsible manner. So we put those things back in. Some of the factors affecting the budget requested are listed here. We have not yet received the assessment of the joint programs from Wenham. We are still carrying estimates in the budget for increases to our insurance policies. On the flip side, some of the decisions we have made over the last few years and some of the recommendations we are making this year have us in pretty solid financial position. For instance, we have met or will meet this year our minimum targets in our stabilization and free cash accounts. And we are closely scrutinizing our capital program to figure out how we'll fund it in FY22. As a result, we are not requesting or recommending a transfer to the patent homestead or the capital stabilization fund, and we are able to recommend a much smaller transfer to our general stabilization fund than we have made recently. Despite the position we are in with regard to annual tax levy growth, we feel we are controlling our spending and have established suitable reserves to maintain our financial stability and bond rating. Here's the FY22 budget overview. In looking at our budget year over year, on the expenditure side of the ledger, we can see that our biggest recommended reduction in spending comes in the financial transfers line. As I mentioned a minute ago, we're not recommending any transfer to the capital stabilization account because we've met the minimum target there, and we put over $900,000 into that account last year. So we're not required to, by our financial policies, to put anything there this year. And given our deference to trying to protect the town from an override and respect the voters' abilities to pay, we're not making any recommendation for appropriation there. We're also going to make a recommendation for a smaller appropriation to the general stabilization account. We are recommending some modest growth in town operating budgets of about 3.7%, but that generally roughly equals what we cut out of the budget in operating last year. So it's in a few slides from now you'll see, and I'll call it out again. If you look at our projected town spending plan for this year, it is equal to the FY20 spending plan, off by about $2,000. It's roughly the same spending plan that we had 2 years ago. On the revenue side, we are relying on a lot less in terms of appropriations from free cash. So that at the second lower part of the slide here, you can see that we're reducing what we're spending in free cash this year by about 50%. So another look at our overview. Here's the year-over-year budget analysis. As we noted earlier, our projected revenues are about $955,000, with town operating expenses down about $250,000. And the assessment to from the schools is about $1.2 million increase. If the school department is able to reduce their projected assessment to the town of Hamilton by $192,000, we can balance this budget as presented today and avoid an override. This is a historical look at our town budget over the last few years, from FY16 to now. If you look at the lower line that is called total general fund excluding HWRSD, that's the regional school district, you'll see that our spending is equal to, just about equal to what we spent in FY20. So we spent in FY20 $14,058,056, and we're projecting $14,060,000 this year. So last year we were down because we had made cuts due to the pandemic, and this year we're coming back up a little bit to where we were previously. But again, nearly all of that is stuff that we took out of last year's budget. Trying to make sure I don't lose my place. This is another way of analyzing the school district's impact on the town's budget. I'm going to ask Marissa and Diane if they want to speak to this slide. Marissa?
Well, good morning, everyone. First of all, I'd like you to introduce you to Diane Katz. She's the Assistant Finance Director. She's
Hi,
actually
everyone.
sitting here with me today. And I'm sure she'll be taking over some of the functions. So I want to make sure that you get to know her. So this slide, it's just gives you the same information as a previous slide, but more on the percentage basis. This was actually a slide that the FinCom had actually requested. I did a similar presentation to the FinCom at the last FinCom meeting that I attended. And this was one of the slides that it was thought that would be helpful to see the breakdown from the school expenditures versus the town. Now, one thing to take into consideration is that it doesn't show just the assessment. It actually shows the total school's budget. And then it also shows you the assessment so that you can see the growth trend on total expenditures at the Hamilton Wyndham Regional School District. Average, it's about a 4%, 4.2% increase on an average basis. As you can see, some years are higher than others, but on an average basis is just about a little over the 4%. Then it does show you the share and the increase to the town. I did include the total amount. So if some of these percentages do not look familiar to you, I'm not just looking at the assessment without debt, because to me, you also have to pay for debt. So that's part of your assessment, whether it's called debt assessment and operational assessment, it's still part of your assessment. So I tend to look at both numbers, although they're most of the times presented separately. And then it shows you the total general fund increase over the years. And one thing that I wanted to include in there is the segregation of what the total is without the financial reserves policies or transfers. As you know, we started to transfer transfer into the stabilization, capital stabilization a couple of years back when we adopted the financial policies. And it's just by looking at the FY20 budget without having that last row there, you would look at the FY20 budget and say, we had a 13.6% increase, and that's kind of a scary number there. But that was not the case. It was because it was the first year that we were doing the financial policies. So there was a significant amount that was transferred into the capital stabilization, into the general stabilization. And that's not really an increase in the budget. I mean, it's just changing buckets. That was in free cash, and we moved it to the general stabilization. We moved it to the capital stabilization. So the bottom line gives you more of a true reflection of what the increase was of the budget over the past few years. You want to?
I'll address this one, and then I think, Marissa, you're going to have a couple more after this. So,
Okay.
This is just a snapshot of the proposed FY22 capital program as it stands right now. This is based on department head requests for FY22, as well as prioritization and review by the capital committee. These items listed here are capital purchases we are likely to recommend this year, though we are still analyzing the final funding sources for them. So even though I have this color coded already, it's in draft form, so don't necessarily buy into all of that. And there could still be some changes there. And also the town hall is listed here, but it doesn't. But this sheet doesn't show projected CPC requests. So the 4.7 is obviously not if it goes forward and the board of selectmen put it on the warrant and the FinCom recommend it, it would be separate. So, but we did want to show it as a capital project. It is there. All right, now we're getting back into slides that Marissa will talk about.
Just to follow up on a comment from what Joe just mentioned on the capital program, I just wanted to remind everyone that the current budget is being presented just has a placeholder of $500,000 for capital. So once all the decisions are made, there would also be changes to the overall budget. Right now, we just have a placeholder of $500,000. And the funding source, as this budget is presented, does show that $500,000 being funded from free cash, which might not necessarily be the case for all of the items. So just to let you know that would be a change there. These just give you a little bit of the big picture on where your budget is going. So this pie chart just shows you the percentage that is going to education, unclassified, public safety, general government, public works, culture and recreation, and health and human services. As you can see, the education accounts for 61.4% of the budget, and that does include the Essex North Shore Agriculture School as well. It's not just Hamilton Wyndham Regional School District. So I just want to point that out, and includes debt service as well. Unclassified, that's the other big one. I always get the question, what's unclassified? So that's usually the bottom part of the Appendix B that usually goes to the town meeting, and it includes capital, it includes debt service, it includes your health insurance, it includes your property and casualty insurance, it includes Medicare, unemployment, and also includes all of the transfers that are done to other funds from the general fund. So it's a combination of things that don't really fall into a function of general government, public safety, public works. It's more like, general in nature. So that's what is included under that unclassified number. Then as you can see, it follows through public safety, general government, public works.
Before we move to the next slide, I'll just also reference something that Marissa mentioned about the capital program. Yeah, we are carrying $500,000 right now as a hold for capital projects, and with that likely coming from free cash. We have some more idea right now about what we might be able to do to adjust that. But because two things, right? Because we still don't know what the final school assessment is going to be. We still don't know what the final insurance numbers. Anytime you make an adjustment to one number in the budget, kind of affects everything else. It affects the other charges and things. So because we've lost Marissa's full-time services and we only have her occasionally on a weekend, we're going to try and take it easy on Diane and try to make all those adjustments in a week or so when we have more a more firm idea about everything. So we're not quite there. We're almost there. But just wanted you to know we aren't holding anything back. We just don't want to make changes just to go back and make changes again and make changes again. So this is another Marissa slide.
So this one is the revenue side of things. And it shows you how we were able to balance the budget. And as you can see, unfortunately, 88.5% comes from property taxes. There's not a lot of revenue sources out there, and the town, unfortunately, the residents actually pay for 88.5% on this through their, real estate taxes. We do have motor vehicle at 2.6, free cash at 2.4. State and local aid, which is not a final number at the moment, but we are using the current balance from FY21 as a placeholder. Our local receipts account for 2.8%, and our indirect costs from the Water Enterprise Fund account for 1.1%. I just like to point out that on the free cash number, currently the only thing that is included in that number is the $500,000 of as a placeholder, and the $349,000 as a transfer to the General Stabilization Fund. No transfer to the Capital Stabilization Fund, as Joe mentioned earlier, but those are the only two numbers that are currently in the budget being funded from free cash.
I'd also just like to add that though Marissa referenced that property taxes account for 88.5%, if you actually look at our revenue sources, other than state local aid, virtually all of these are local revenues. So essentially 97.5% of your budget is funded through local sources. So it's not all property tax, but it is all coming right from our taxpayers and our residents here in Hamilton. So 2.5% of the revenue budget is not a significant amount at all. Not in a $35 million budget. So before I turn this one also over to Marissa, because she's much more inside of the numbers in this, I would just note that for the first time in several years, many years, I guess, we are not making any recommendations or requests for capital programs in the water fund. We kind of reached our limit on that for now. We need to finish up some of the projects that have been funded and been begun, but we're going to try to get this fund to stabilize a little bit. Marissa?
So this is just an overview of the Water Enterprise Fund, the current FY21 budget and with the projected FY22 budget. It's pretty straightforward. One thing that I'd like to mention is that the revenue estimates, there could still be some changes to it, where we're waiting to see how our third commitment was gonna be as far as consumption. This is the first full year that we're gonna have since the rates have been increased. And so we haven't really had a full cycle to have a good idea of how much that we should estimate the user charges at. The other factor is, as we all know, there's more people working from home. So we're trying to see how that is going to affect our estimates when it comes to the water consumption. So that could be still something that could change in the future. As you can see, this budget includes the use of retained earnings in the amount of $241,952. This to me is something that is a little concerning because for the past 4 years, we've been using retained earnings to balance this budget, which to me, it's not something that is sustainable. Eventually, if you continue to take from retained earnings, eventually you're not going to have anything to take from. So something to be concerned about. We have approved quite a number of projects in the Water Enterprise Fund in the past few years. So our debt service costs has definitely increased. We have right now, as of FY22 budget, about $800,000 just for debt service payments. I was going to mention a little bit on the retained earnings, but I can actually do that later on because I do have a slide that shows what the financial policies are when it comes to the water retained earnings. But in summary, it actually says that we should keep 20% in the retained earnings, 20% of the total budget, unless we're expecting to have some big projects coming down the road. And if that's the case, then we should actually have a little more in the reserves. So pretty straightforward here. I think the biggest one here is the debt service and the projects. We still have another project that might be coming on that we have outstanding as a short-term loan that we're probably going to be rolling into long-term in the near future. So just something to be in the lookout would be the debt service payments and how those have increased significantly.
What is the current retained earnings?
So
We're about 24%. I think we're right at about 24% with this budget, Marissa, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, currently we ended FY20 at $716,000. We're projecting for FY21 $724, which again, assuming that our budget comes in as we our actuals come in as budgeted. But for FY22, we're projecting that we're going to be at about 482. And if I'm not mistaken, and I'll be able to get into that later on one of the slides, but I think that our policy stated that we should have about 400,000. That should be the minimum that we should have. But if we know that we have water projects that are coming down the road, then we should probably have a little more than that. So we're getting close to that number.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's another water enterprise slide. Marissa, you want to?
Yeah, so actually I was reading from this slide. I forgot this slide was on the presentation, so sorry. But yes, this just gives you a little more information of what the actuals have been for the water enterprise for the past few years, what our budget is for FY21, and you can see what we're projecting that our retained earnings number will be the 724,519 that I just mentioned. And based on the current numbers for the FY22 budget, what we would be projecting the FY22, that it would be ending at 482,567. The number right around the middle where it says retained earning, that has been the amount of retained earnings that we've been using for the past 4 years to actually balance the budget.
So we're a little down from what we spent there last year, a little above the previous years. Okay.
Okay, so if we could go to the next slide.
There we go.
So the next slide gets into the financial reserves and the policies that have been adopted. Just gives you a little in summary format what our free cash was certified September 10th, 2020 at $3.3 million. Out of the $3.3 million, at the special town meeting for FY21, $565,000 was approved to be used. And this budget, as we have previously mentioned, proposes $849,074 to be used from free cash, and that consists of the $500,000 placehold for capital, and then the $349,074 to the general stabilization. That would mean that the unappropriated free cash balance would be about 1.9%, and that represents 5.4% of the total FY22 general fund budget. Currently, the policy states that we should have at least a 5% of our total budget in free cash, and then 5% in our general stabilization fund. So we would be right around that number. Then moving on to the stabilization fund, the current balance is approximately $1.4 million. We're proposing that for FY22, there would be a free cash transfer of $349,074. And that would mean that we would just reach our goal of 5%, and we would be at 5.1% of the general fund budget.
Reason all of a sudden my page forward stopped working, so I'm going to have to do it the old-fashioned way. There we go. Go ahead.
So the next slide mentions, goes into the capital stabilization fund. Again, the current balance is about $1.4 million. The policy states that we should have at a minimum the total annual asset depreciation. So we just had our final FY20 financial statements in which the depreciation was $1.3 million. And by using those that number, that would represent 105% of the FY20 depreciation, and that's why we're actually proposing to not fund the capital stabilization in FY22. Again, I just want to mention that this is the minimum, but we're there, and if we're not proposing to use any of the capital stabilization fund, I think this would be the year that you would probably want to skip to avoid try to avoid an override or a lower impact in the town residents. The next one is the Water Enterprise Fund. The FY22 projected ending balance is $482,567. And the policy states that we should have at a minimum 20% of the total operating budget, which is $398,290. But we should have a significantly higher number if major infrastructure improvements are necessary in the future. Okay.
Before we move on to the next slide, I want to call out, Marissa and I are yin and yang, which is great. She sees things in a very pragmatic way, and we are at our minimums. And she's being sure to caution us that we want to make sure that we're at or above our minimums. I look at it slightly differently. We are at our minimums. For the first time ever since the town adopted its financial policies, we have actually met all the minimum targets that we wanted to meet. So that's, it's not great news. I agree with Marissa. There's more work to be done, but we have at least met our minimums. We've stabilized ourselves in that way. And I think that's something that we should be happy about. Next year, we'll get back to trying to fund, make sure we keep all of these things moving in a positive direction a little bit more incrementally. The town's made big investments in these stabilization funds the last couple of years. It's okay to take a breath this year and be a little bit more cautious with that. But next year, I'd anticipate we'd be making additional requests to increase these funds again. So I want to give you that kind of positive outlook on these numbers because the next slide is not as positive. Marissa?
Yeah. Well, to Joe's point, I also agree that, I think the town has made great progress. I mean, the policies were just adopted a couple of years ago, and for us to be at the minimums, I think that's great news. I do feel that, you should make this part of your annual budget process, just because, as Joe mentioned, we are at the minimum, and I think it's great. I think there's a lot of communities that are not there yet, but I'm just looking at the capital stabilization, for example, and all it takes is one big purchase, and that is cut in half. So, if you continue on a consistent basis to look at these numbers and say, we're going to continue to fund it, maybe not as last year was a big transfer that went into the capital stabilization. I wouldn't say that you're going to do that on an annual basis, but if you agree in a number that the town feels comfortable with, I think that would be great. And yes, and now, so we're going into the slide that everyone will be unhappy with. Unfortunately, we're projecting, again, these are all projections. It's all projected based on the budget that we currently have. We're also assuming, one thing that is very important to mention when it comes to this slide is we are assuming a 2% increase in assessed valuations. In conversations with the assessor, he believes that is the trend. Everyone seems to agree that, they're expecting valuations to go up again next year. Taking that into consideration and the budget that is being presented in front of you, the preliminary projection would be that the tax rate would be at 18.06. The next slide shows a breakdown of where the 1806 really goes to, for lack of a better word. As you can see, almost $11 of the 1806 goes to Hamilton Wyndham Regional School District. Then it follows by public safety, general government, public works, and then all the other different components of the budget. I think the big number here is that, obviously more than half of the tax dollars are going to the Hamilton Wyndham Regional School District.
And just about $7 of the tax bill goes to fund everything not the Hamilton Wyndham Regional School District. So that's big.
I think also if you just look at the trend line too.
Yeah.
So the 1622 up to 1806, the lion's share of that increase is the increase in the school line item.
Yeah. Okay.
I should have included FY17 here because the tax rate was actually 1725. I shouldn't have started with the lowest one. That would have looked better, sorry. Good point, maybe one for town meeting.
Actually, I prefer that we do that for town meeting.
Right, because the previous year, actually, the tax rate was 17.25. Okay, so the next slide goes into, again, just what I mentioned. It looks at the assessed valuations, and the FY 22 is an estimate, and it's just based on a 2% increase over FY 21.
To this, I'd just say really quickly, if you'll remember, part of the reason we made the cut last year is we were anticipating flat, no growth in property values, and we actually wound up getting growth in the property values. So at the end, we approved the budget in June at town meeting, and we anticipated a higher tax rate than we actually got because the values went up, and we were able to adjust the tax rate slightly. So I shudder to think what our tax rate would be this year if we had no growth in values last year. The tax rate would probably be even higher. Marissa, Miss.
The next one also does not look good. It's the excess levy capacity, which we have none. So over the years, our excess levy capacity has been decreasing, and we're at the point of needing an override because there is none for the town. So this is just gives you a little bit of a summary of where the numbers have been over the past few years. So this slide is some historical information of how much the home value has been in the past few years, what the tax rate and what the impact has been on our residents' tax bill. Again, just want to point out, this is estimated. We're estimating a 2% increase in the home value. We're estimating a 2% increase in the valuations. And as of right now, we're estimating that the tax rate would be 1806, which will represent an increase of about $491.23 in a resident tax bill. And the last slide, it just shows you what the outstanding debt is as of FY 21 for the town. As you can see, our enterprise debt has significantly increased over the past couple of years. That's due to all of the water projects that have been approved, the water treatment plant, the water distribution. And that's the reason why you see that $800,000 payment in debt service in the water enterprise fund. And I think that concludes the slides.
On the flip side, the enterprise debt has gone up, and we all know that because we've been trying to make investments in our water system. But on the flip side, the town overall debt has gone down. I think you were at a point in 2015 and 2017 where you were over $6 million a year in debt, and now that is under $4.5 million. So that's better. We're paying off our balances. So we'll stop the share there. And
but we're also deferring maintenance. So just because we're not spending it doesn't mean we're not going to have to spend it later.
True. Hopefully we can get it when the other side stuff is coming down.
I was going to say, if you go, that was my question. If you went back to that slide 21, that's the only thing that went down was debt service. So in terms of,
yeah. Christina has a question about lease payments. Marissa?
Yeah, I noticed, and Marissa, we talked about this, I think, when you see FinCom. In the operating budget, there were, I think there was a lease payment for a police car and a lease payment for a fire truck. And I was wondering if the police car, is that being switched from, I know the practice has been over the past years to buy a new police car every year, and then occasionally we had to do two. So is that one of the police cars being switched to a lease?
We've actually done leases in the past. Normally, we do have one that it's a purchase, and for the past, at least since I've been here, the last time that we had the two vehicles being purchased in 1 year, one was on a lease payment and one was a straight out purchase. So there is a lease payment for 3 years on this particular vehicle for the police station, and you are correct. There is also a payment for the fire truck, and that's on a 5-year basis. It's part of the budget.
So is that a different truck that then is the squad truck that's on the capital?
Nope, that is the same truck.
So there's $185,000 for it under capital and lease payment?
Well, so
It's on the capital plan. It's on the capital plan. It was a capital request. How we pay for it can be, either through a free cash appropriation or raise and appropriate, or we can try to work it into the operating budget. As of this moment, we've decided to try to work the lease payment for the fire truck into the operating budget. So that'll give them some room to, in future years, as that payment rolls off, we'd be able to use that line item to make other equipment purchases in the fire department.
And I think we had talked about this last year with the lease payments in municipal leases and the same kind of thing, putting it in the operating budget instead of capital. I think, did we start that last year for the most part? I mean, we've done the leases in the past, but I think we discussed the leases and whatnot last year.
We did, but we have, but you're correct. We've done it in past. Prior to that, we have also used the lease payments into the capital budget, into the operating budget.
That's correct. At least since I've been here, I know that we've done a couple of leases. One was for the DPW director's truck and the other one was for the police chief. And both of them were on a lease. Also, we did do a lease for the engine one. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ray, but I think it was the engine one. That was also on a lease. We're still paying on that. I believe that's on a 10-year lease. So we have done the leases in the past.
Correct,
and those are usually included in as part of the operating budget. I think to Christine's point, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what you're trying to get at is that $500,000 placeholder would include the 185. We could just subtract that from that number. And you are correct there. I think the way the capital slide is being presented now is all the projects that have been requested and approved from the capital committee. It doesn't necessarily reflect a funding source and how they're being paid for. That's something that still needs to be worked on. So the 185, although would be a capital approved item, it would not necessarily be a free cash ask because it's already incorporated into the budget as an operating expense as a lease payment.
Okay, yeah, that was exactly my,
Right.
because in my, my brain, I've separated things like, okay, this is a capital item and this is an operating budget item, and they seem to be in both places, but it will get straightened out. Okay.
Yeah, they're not going to be double counted right now. I think the slide doesn't necessarily show just what's being asked to be funded from free cash on a capital. It just shows all the projects that went to the capital committee, and the capital committee, and in conjunction with Joe, have decided to move forward with.
We need, okay. So the police car that's in the operating budget, is that one of the, what is it, 7? Am I correct that? So first, a separate question. Has it been 7 squad police cruisers and we replace one every year, except every 6th year we do 2? Is that the number?
No, I see that Chief Chief would like to take this one, I believe.
Good morning, everyone. So the way the fleet maintenance program is we have a total of 7 cruisers. We replace 1 year, and every 3rd year we replace 2. We deferred last year's because department heads were asked to make some cuts, and that's what we do is we deferred that. We keep the vehicles in the fleet for a total of 6 years. So when we bring one in, we mileage that up and then we get rid of one. So if that answers your question. Now this year is going to be the first year that we actually, we're buying our first hybrid police cruiser. And we're hoping with the hybrid model, and I was writing down some notes, with the hybrid model, fuel mileage as it pertains to driving is going to be 343 miles a year we save. In idling, 61% of the time vehicles, cruisers idle. Out of an 8-hour shift, 61% of the day, the cruisers are at idle. And that's supposed to move over to 933 miles of savings for a total of 1,200 miles, which if you take the 1,200 miles, you times it by an average of 275 gas mileage, that's going to hopefully save us roughly $3,500 in gas a year. And if you keep that vehicle for 6 years, that brings us to an average of about $34,000. So that's why we keep the cruisers in the fleet for roughly 6 years. But basically, to go back to your question, and I digress. So it's one new one every year. Every 3 years, we get two. Keep them in the fleet for 6 years. Get rid of the old ones. I'm sorry if I went off on a tangent, but I'm pretty excited, believe it or not. And I'm a car guy, pretty excited about trying the hybrid cruiser to see if we can realize some savings in fuel. And then eventually all the cruisers will be a hybrid model. I don't know anything about the longevity of the hybrid. They're just coming out, and I'm hoping the maintenance on the hybrid won't offset the fuel we're going to save from the fuel. And we'll see.
This is as long as your acceleration speed is good, Chief.
We can always try it. We can always try the Tesla. They're supposed to have acceleration off the line.
Teslas are the next one, right?
That's right.
All right, so my only question is the one that's in the operating budget, is that one of those 7, or is this an additional vehicle?
So there's 2 this year. So we were supposed to get 2 last year. We deferred 1 and pushed it off to this year. So this year will be the 2. So we actually waited 4 years. It'll be a 4-year span opposed to a 3-year.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I think we're supposed to move into, we're about 9:46 now. I think.
Joe, I had 2, I didn't type them in, Joe, but I had 2 just general questions, comments. One was, because you're talking about what to do for town meeting on slide 22, which is our capacity sort of going down. I was wondering if it made sense at town meeting to show overlay the increase in the school budget to sort of correlate with our levy capacity going down. So if you'd overlay one going up, one going down, it'd probably be a similar dollar amount. So a recommendation in terms of a presentation.
So,
and then just a general question on, once again, I talked about debt service. Once again, I don't want to get into discussion now, but something we should talk about later. But I don't know, obviously you're trying to balance the budget this year, but in terms of good practice, is it appropriate to decrease a debt service? That just means that we're deferring maintenance and capital expenses down the road. So I just, in terms of good practice, I see, we're doing a good job of paying off our bills, but that means that we're not doing stuff that capital committee is probably recommending we do. So I just, maybe later on we have a discussion about, what that will do, what we see that doing down the road, 4 or 5 years down the road. It's not going to trend down. Is it better to flatline that, and to make sure we're doing appropriate, expenditures yearly instead of sort of decreasing it now to balance a budget, and then it'll slowly go up again when we realize that everything that we've deferred is piled up on us, just like town hall. So, yeah, just discussion, I think later. I don't know if we have time for it today, but.
May I add to that, if that's
go ahead,
okay?
Marissa.
So on the debt service, the decrease is based on the debt service schedule that we get when we actually issue the debt. This number does not include any estimates if the town decides to bring the town hall project back to annual town meeting. So that number could change if that's a decision that is made and that project comes back to town meeting. But the service payments, these are actually based on the projects that have been approved, we've issued debt for, and they're on this schedule. So unless there's new projects, which there could be, if you were to decide to bond some of the projects from the capital project, from the capital plan, then this number would change.
That makes sense. I think we're a little bit behind, but just one kind of comment on the presentation. From me, talking about the school budget this year, I don't know if anybody tuned into the meeting on Wednesday for the school committee, but they have, I'm going to try to think of how to word this. They haven't reduced their budget, but they've adjusted their assessment numbers. So it's brought down, I think, close to our 190. I think they're at like 160 or so thousand in a reduction for the ask. So we're getting closer to that number that we would like from them, but they haven't actually cut the budget. They've just changed their numbers a little bit and raised their anticipation for their state, Chapter 70, et cetera. So hopefully they've got a meeting coming up, I think on Monday with their committee group for the budget, and hopefully they will look at reducing the budget instead of just changing the assessment and cut a little bit out to meet us where we want to be with Wenham and us for eliminating the override possibility. So fingers crossed on Monday, they have some good hard conversations about what to change in the budget to meet our ask. All right.
I have one question. It's could be weedy and I don't want it to be there. So I'm going to just try and generalize it. When we look at the excess capacity, historically, we had reached we had gone, and I'm saying historically, maybe 20 years ago, 15 years ago, we exceeded our capacity and then we built it back up. And now it is dropping down. How did it ever get built back up? And again, that's a weedy question, but if Marissa could put something together or somebody put something together to understand how could that reverse and we could see, and what would need to happen in order for the excess capacity to move in the other direction?
I think that's a good question, Nick, because, we did have a whole series of overrides there with the schools back in the day, and somehow we pulled ourselves out of that. And part of it was us moving out of the recession, I think, as well. But there's got to be some other factors there that we can maybe use as some kind of data so that we can see what's trending or what had happened to see if we can adjust something.
Correct. I
think that's a great question. I had the same exact question, Nick. And I think, as Sean said, the key is looking is how did we do it in the past? And is that even possible in the future?
Right.
Because of the recession, I'm sure there was a bunch of different factors, some of which just aren't going to be necessarily applicable, but some might be. But right. I think that's a great analysis that we should do.
All right. Anything else before we move on? Okay.
Can I interrupt for a second?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. So good. I have some appointments that I have to get to, some vaccinations of some elderly people that I thought I would be online. I was just wondering who had any questions for the fire department in general from the finance committee.
Yeah, so in interest of kind of getting Ray out of here so he can do what's best for the town, does anybody have any questions for him directly on anything from the public safety budget on his side of things?
I think I had one question. Hold on a second. Let me just. It's just like the Yeah, once again, I'm just looking at trends, not necessarily dollars or personnel or wages or stuff. But just look at the trend in terms of the overtime trend seemed to jump up and, from 18, 19, 20, then it jumped up quite a bit. So I just didn't know if there was a specific reason for that trend jumping up it went from like 28 to 30 up to like 47, 48. Now it's 49. So the jump from like 31 to, 48 is quite a bit of a percentage jump just in terms of trends. So I didn't know if it's because we lost somebody, we had to pay for overtime, or if it's just sort of extra calls on weekends and nights.
Both. What happened? We have weekend coverage. The all firefighters generally take, and we're trending now with the call firefighters before over. And my goal and 9 firefighters put through the academy and to hire more call firefighters, which coverage shift. And that's what happened in the past. With that trend, with the call firefighters being reduced over a period of time, the full-time firefighters were eligible to take those vacant shifts that weren't being filled by call firefighters. And now it's starting to trend the other way. So I'm hoping the overtime budget will stabilize. And I actually decreased it the previous year by, I think it was $10,000. And then with the addition of last year we hired a new full-time position, which my hopes are to also decrease the overtime budget. But right now we're seeing where it's going to stabilize, with the trends, once we get into it after I've hired these call firefighters, we'll see where it trends, to make sure that we have adequate coverage for the town on weekends and weekdays. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I just wanted to hear some discussion about that. Yeah, this is page 28 for people who wanted to follow along on the overall budget.
All right, any other questions for Ray before we let him go? All right, I guess, Ray, if we think of anything while we're discussing and talking, we'll make sure to reach out to Joe or yourself and get some answers from you. We appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just got one more thing to add, with the clinic, the pop-up clinic that just came up abruptly. I guess there has been some confusion with the 21st. People are signing up for the 22nd, thinking it's clear age that is going to take place tomorrow, the 21st, from 1 to 4 p.m. So I just wanted to clarify it for any viewers out there that might need to know this information. Okay. And I thank you for your time. And it was nice talking to you.
Thanks, Ray.
Thanks, Ray.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll move on now. We've got our first kind of up at bat here. We've got public safety, police, fire, and dispatch. We just kind of heard from Ray a little bit about the clinic and some of the answers about overtime. And we've got Russ on the Zoom here as well. Joe, do you want to lead into this, or Russ, do you want us?
I think you can go right to Russ. Russ is able to speak for himself.
Okay.
Well, good. Go ahead, Russ, if you've got anything to add.
Please. So good morning, everyone. So just so everyone, we're all on the same sheet of music. So we have 14 police officers, no additional full-time police officers. We operate with an average of 8 reserve officers, 8 to 10. They kind of come and go. The reserve officers are there to augment full-time officers. There's going to be a shift in the way we're going to be able to use part-time officers, reserve officers in the future. Because of police reform, the state is going to mandate that our reserve officers have the same level of training as the full-time officers, which I am fully in support of. And what I mean by that is, if you're a full-time officer, you go through about 770 hours worth of academy training. If you're a part-time officer, you go through about 350 hours of training. The problem here is you're asking a part-time officer to do the same job as a full-time officer. So the state has looked at that, and I've also been a supporter of this for a while, that all officers should have the same training. So down the future, we're going to see some different, you're going to see a little different model as it pertains to police departments. I would think across, I think you're going to start seeing some police departments definitely out west, the smaller towns that are going to start merging their police departments. Maybe that's going to trickle up our way. I don't know. But I know for a fact out west, you're seeing towns like Lansborough, which is a town of roughly 3,000, and Leverett, which is a town of 900. They're looking at merging models. So maybe down the road, we'll be able to have a discussion about merging again somewhere down the road. Back to my budget here. So one of the largest increases you're going to see is under 15210, and the line item is 510010, which is permanent wages. Now, if you remember correctly, when we built these budgets on the pre-COVID budget build. So we built our original budgets in 21, and then we had to redesign them because of COVID. We were asked to make cuts and pull monies out. So when we built these budgets, we built them off the pre-COVID model. So where you see that $85,000 increase in my budget. So when I built my budget, I had 2 people retire in July. Officer Sergeant Wallace retired and Officer Shaw retired. And part of how I realized savings was I didn't hire a full-time officer until December. So that's $27,368 of that 85,000 mark. The full-time hire that we hired to replace one of our officers had a master's degree, not a bachelor's. We pay officers, if you have a bachelor's or a master's, you get a educational incentive or a stipend along with that. So the full-time officer had a master's, which realizes over the year gives because of Quinn, and I can go into Quinn, it's a little more complicated because of the educational incentive that we have. There's an $8,581 increase. We had one officer that got his master's, so he got a bump of $2,700. We have one officer this fiscal that's going to get his master's, so we have a placeholder in there of $2,200. We had a promotion. Officer Donovan got promoted to sergeant, so there was an increase of $3,500 out of that 85. And then we also have step raises. We have 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 5 positions that are going to get step raises in this fiscal as well. And then you had your cost of your COLAs that were built in there. So that is where your $85,000 comes from. So I just wanted to explain that, where that big number comes from, because that's a large number that drove my budget up. Is there any questions on that first? Because I'm more than happy to go into explaining each one of them.
No, Chief, I only had one question, one comment. I think that it sort of recognized sort of the overtime as well too, is that your overtime has trended down since 2018, which is probably because you're spreading out. But one of the things you had commented on a couple of years ago was that by hiring the resource officer,
Yep.
would allow you to give that flexibility over the summer time to have him cover vacations. Has that been successful? Obviously last year is hard to trend that, but has that been a successful approach?
So this is our first year that we've actually had, well, and I'm glad you brought that up. So, and let me answer that in a second, Bill. I'm going to move on. I'm just going to hint about the SRO because you brought him up. What's also not shown in my budget is a revenue offset for the SRO. That's also not shown in my budget. So this fiscal year, this is going to be a different year for us because our SRO is still in play, but the amount of time he goes into the school is different. He's Zooming. So we got to figure out how we're going to bill for FY21. But now in FY22, you're looking at a $59,000 revenue offset that's not shown in my budget either. Now for the SRO during the summer months backfills overtime spots. And we talked about that with Nick too, when Nick Tenson is my finance liaison to the police department. So we've had discussions about that. And we also discussed how we're going to do a reduction in the overtime. The same time that when you look at overtime, Bill, at the same time that we're reducing the hours we're spending, every time we give every time there's an increase in your COLA increase, their hourly rate goes up. So we increase the amount of hours because we're covering more. But when we have our COLAs, the officers get their COLAs, that increases their hourly rate. So in answer to your question, yes, because if you look at how much overtime we used last fiscal, and I don't know if you have that in front of you, do you have the actuals in front of you, Bill?
Bill, you're on mute.
I'm looking at the 174 page 22 budget handbook.
So
I don't know what page to look at, but.
So if you look at
I think it's page 26. And there's a column for 21.
Yeah, that's what I was looking at then. Okay, yep, that's
Right.
what I was looking at. Yep,
Actual.
correct.
It's 59,000 something.
Good. So if you look at the actuals in 2019 for overtime, and then look at your actuals in 2020. Under your overtime bill, I think it's 510030.
It goes from 107 down to 92.
Exactly. So we have realized the savings in there.
Okay, great. And you also didn't mention your vehicle. I think isn't your vehicle part of that $85,000 budget increase?
No, that was just
Okay.
So now I can go down. So that was the biggest increase there that I just wanted to explain to everyone. That increase, that would be a much smaller number. I pushed off the new hire. That's what it was. That's why it's a huge increase. And we did that for the savings COVID. But I want to explain that one. some of the other increases, there's a lot of one-time increases, like the professional employee training, you'll see that went up $3,750. I have to send someone to the police academy. That's the cost of the police academy. So that's a one-time expenditure. There is a $3,000 increase under small equipment supplies that wasn't there last year. Every 2 years, we have to recertify on tasers. So every officer has to shoot a taser, and the batteries need to be replaced every 2 years. So that's a one-time expenditure. You'll see a $8,800 increase under public safety supplies. Under uniform and equipment. That's a one-time increase. We have to replace the officers' bulletproof vests, and that's every 5 years. So instead of putting it on capital, we put it in the operating budget, but you won't see that next year. So that was another driving. And also on the vests, if the money's there, we should get I'm working on grants this year. I'm really focusing on grants. We were able to get approximately $30,000 in grants for the police department and $35,000 grants for ECO. So I really want to see if I can. Hamilton's a little unique because sometimes we're eligible for grants and sometimes we're not. So we got $35,000 in grants just for the police department, which was a lot more than I've ever been able to get before. Now, as it pertains to vests, I'm looking at applying for a grant from the state to pick up 50% of that and the feds to pick up 50%. So it could possibly happen that $88,000 goes back and I won't need it. But I just want to explain where that money is coming from. And you'll see a $1,500 increase under police supplies, public safety supplies under 550084. You'll see a 15. That is all of the supplies in the policing world. There's a heck of a markup on the police supplies, but believe it or not, ammunition has gone up 2 to 3 times. Ammunition.
COVID effects, yeah.
It's exactly what it is. It's the COVID effect. It's the pandemic. It's society right now. But ammunition is gone through the roof. So that's a $1,500 increase there. Under medical supplies, there is a increase of $500. That should only be a one-time increase for this year because every 24 months we have to replace our defib pads because they expire. You could still use an expired defib pad. The problem is if you do put it on, it doesn't work. The manufacturer says it's only good for 2 years. So that's a one-time expense because we have to replace our defib pads. So that again is there's a lot of one-time expenses on the police side of the budget this year.
Chief, can I interrupt for a second you're talking about the AED machines and stuff like that, or you're talking about defibs on the equipment? We have a handful at town hall and stuff. Does town hall manage that or does public safety manage those?
Public safety manages that. So everything, all the defibs, so there's the defibs at the rec department, defibs at town hall. So all of those are managed. Those come out of Ray's budget. Only the police defibs come out of the police budget.
Gotcha. Joe, do you know what the useful life is on those? We've had them for a while now.
I don't remember offhand. I'll have to get that answer and get back to you with it. I know they get service checked at least annually. They might get checked actually twice a year. So tested. So.
I'm just curious. I think we're probably close to their useful lifetime. I think I'm guessing.
If I could jump in, I wrote the grant for those and got them for the town.
Uh-huh.
So I can go back and pull the grant information on money and tell you exactly when we got them. But I thought we had a 10-year life on those, Sean.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be great, Mary Beth, if you could get me that information. That'd be helpful.
Sure. Okay.
So each one of those has a battery, and when we go inspect those, we look at them. You open the cover, you look at the battery. It tells you what the battery life is on it, and then you take the defib pads out to see an expiration date on the unopened package. So Ray's firemen go around and check all of them throughout the town. We got some from Mary Beth did a branch. We got some from Beauport Ambulance at one point. It's kind of a mixed bag of what we have. Mm-hmm. Eventually, at some point, we're going to try to get all of them in the same brand, and we're going to try to rotate the pads at the same time. Every 2 years, they're on a maintenance cycle where we rotate those pads.
Yeah, good.
the other thing too, like this year, where will be the SRO, and again, the offset's not in my budget, but we'll be talking to the school, and that's something that the town manager is working on, talking to the school about the reimbursement from the school for the FY22, because the ask from our side, from the police side, is going to be $59,000. And when I look at, and Marissa kindly supplied me the numbers, when I look at the school budget, we have 58 and change. We have just about that amount already budgeted under the SRO for the current fiscal 21 and next fiscal 22. The other thing about the SRO too is I'm going to ask the school superintendent to do a Zoom meeting with all the principals because I want more feedback. I'm getting feedback from individual principals, but I'd like to have a meeting with all of them and say, okay, what are we looking for? Do we need some modifications now? Because I meet with the school superintendent about, okay, where are we going? What are you looking for? Is there anything else additional you need? What else can we do to help you in the schools? So we're due to have a meeting soon too. She's been very busy, as you can imagine, with the COVID and the school committee and everything. So I'm trying to give her a little room, some breathing room, but that's going to be coming up too, an eval.
I think that's good to kind of reevaluate and assess where you are and what the expectations are. I think is always good. With the MOU, MOA, whatever that we have, IMA with the school, with the SRO,
yep.
You said they're budgeting 58,000 for that. Is there any, and I can't remember in that agreement, with that money, is that a 58,000 in perpetuity kind of, or does that adjust based on
it's a 3-year
rates and stuff?
It's a 3-year agreement, so we'll have to, and I believe it was set, we'd bill them what our cost is, and it's based on the amount of time that the SRO actually spends in the building. So it's not the full cost of the police officers for their time in the building. So we're supposed to adjust that invoice to them annually, and then the contract would be up for renewal next year.
Okay.
So we bill them for 170 days, Sean.
Okay, perfect.
Days. Because in Hamilton, it's Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, full days, Wednesday,
Right, no Wednesdays.
day. So we bill them, it kind of extrapolates to 170 days.
Perfect.
And then I'm sorry.
Sorry, go ahead, Chief.
So, and I'm sorry, the number that they budgeted was roughly 57,000 for last year and 57,000 for this year, not 59. What we're looking for, our fully loaded cost with benefits, and our numbers include benefits, stipends, training, or everything, is 59. And then the way we have 2 agreements. We have the financial agreement with the school, and then we have the operating agreement, how he's going to interact, what his role is going to be. And then Joe's in negotiations with the school every December 1st, talks to the school superintendent by contract, and then explains what it's going to be for the next fiscal. So they can budget for it as well.
Gotcha. Marissa, were you going to say nothing?
I was going to say what the chief just said.
Thanks, Chief.
Can I answer any other questions on the police budget? And then I'll touch on, I don't want to take your time, but then I'll touch on the ECO budget real quick too.
Any questions on police for Chief? Before it goes on ECO?
Just a quick one, Chief. With all the one-time expenditures for this year,
Yep.
do you expect other one-time expenditures next year or not?
So, thanks, Nick. So everything, I wish I could have everything on a 1-year cycle, but like defibs is every 2 years, vests are every 5 years. So answer your question, do I have anything planned for next year? Nothing that I know right now that comes to mind that I have to do the one-time expenditures for.
So as a result, do you anticipate a smaller increase next year because of that?
A smaller increase in a certain line item, Nick, or overall?
No, in your overall budget, and I don't have the number, but whatever that percentage is, if it's a 3% increase, do you expect to have like a 2.8% increase?
Yeah, I would think that the overall, with the exceptions of if I could keep salaries and wages out of it, because that's driven by contract, for as it pertains to cost expenditures, I would say the other thing, Nick, too, it's hard to answer that because I had IMC contract went up, Motorola contract went up. So I can't predict what their contracts are going, how they're going to predict their contracts or how they're going to give me their contracts. And some of these people like Motorola and IMC, they're the only game in town. So it's not like I can shop and compare and try to get a lower price. But as it pertains to like defibs, vests, those kind of things, I don't see anything coming down the line for next year.
All right, thank you.
Now, Nick, I know you're going to hold me to this because you're going to say when you come see me the next
I'm not
budget.
setting you up.
Yeah, you
Oh,
saw,
yeah,
you
no,
saw
I know
up,
that's
up
Well,
in
he
the
asked
upper
the
left,
question.
up in the upper left-hand corner, Chief, you see it says recording, right? You see that
Yeah, I
little button in
know,
the
I
upper
saw
left-hand
that.
corner?
And you notice my answer was very guarded the way I answered. I kind of a tap dance because I
So-
know how Nick works.
So Joe, I was gonna bring this question up later, but since we're talking about it now, I'll just bring it up once again. I want a long, robust session. But in terms of the CARES Act for this year, next year, is that how is you taking that into the budget? Is there anything that we've spent money on one-time expense for the police that would be a care? So just give me a general comment on CARES Act and where we're at with that in terms of the budget.
So to date, we've had access to utilize federal funds both through the CARES Act and through FEMA. And we've been tracking all of our expenses that were related to COVID in accounting and in the departments through those two accounts. I have been concerned more about FEMA because FEMA was only going to be paying out 75%, not 100%, and they were rejecting some costs that weren't covered by CARES. We've got guidance actually yesterday from DOR that FEMA is now going to be relaxing its standards and they'll be doing more funding, and that there's an expectation of a potentially down the road additional funding. So as long as we continue to track our expenses specifically to COVID and fund them in that way, they shouldn't impact in any real way the operating budgets as we set them. And that's what our goal is going to be, is to continue in that path. So the federal government's made a pivot with the change in administration to have FEMA be more active in this and not so guarded. And the CARES Act money, originally the CARES Act money was supposed to expire in December. It's now been extended till next December. Originally, the state was wanting us to complete our reporting by the end of this month. Now they've said it'll be at least June 30th before we have to reconcile. So we've got until, we got some time to run CARES money. We're
not assuming any CARES Act money in our budget right now. We're basically spending.
No, not assuming CARES Act money. As I have expenses that come up that are related or because of our response to the pandemic, we can apply those to the CARES Act money. And we've been very, I think the chief and Marissa will agree with me that we've been very judicious about the way we've used that money. We did not just go ahead and try and buy a whole bunch of things because we could or because they qualified. We were very careful about where we spent that money. We still have a good amount of the money that was allocated to the town of Hamilton available to us if we need it here in the next few months. So.
Any other questions for Chief about police before he moves on to ECO? All right, Chief, ECO, tell us what we need to know.
Okay, so there's only two increases that I want to discuss on the ECO that for the ECO budget I consider significant. There's a $2,700 increase under permanent wages, and the $2,700 increase is because of the COLA, as well as we had some employees that have been there longer are taking a step raise. So that's what drove that $2,700 number. And the other number that you're going to see down there on voice data and video service is a $2,040 increase. Those are my two highest increases in ECO. And the $2,040 increase was an increase because of our Motorola contract and IMC contract. Both of those contracts went up. That's what drove that number. Those are the numbers that I can't control. And again, Motorola and IMC, they're the only game in town. So it's not anything I can even kind of do a comparison shop. So my overall budget in ECO went up $7,000. But $4,700 of that, $2,000 was roughly contract driven of Motorola outside contracts, Motorola IMC, and $2,700 was your step raises and your COLA increases. I just wanted to mention those two things.
And we have some updates we need to do to repeaters or something like that. Is that right, Chief? And we're working on a grant for some of that. Am I correct, or I can't remember?
No, so what you're referring to is in capital. So we have 3 towers throughout the town, and we're doing increases. We're doing increases on 2 of the towers now. So those towers are the ECO towers that do police and fire, and we've already approved the money we're doing in the capital improvement projects, already been approved, and we're working on 2 of those now. The other question was, should we move? We were going to wait a year and then do it in FY '23. So the question was with the capital committee, are we going to move that to FY '22? When we talk about the towers, picture big antennas, and there's a huge computer at the base of that antenna. The problem with the receivers, which I'm calling the computers, the receivers are 25 years old. They're not making equipment, they're not making the parts to fix those receivers anymore. Motorola already told us we're done with those receivers. We don't make the parts anymore. We'll service them, but if they go down, you're on your own. So that's why we're doing the updates to the receivers now for 2 of the towers. And Capital was, and I believe they told you, or they suggesting that we move the fix the last tower this fiscal in FY '22. There's no grants for that though, Sean.
Right.
On that point, Chief, I don't see that as part of the capital plan.
So is it on FY '23?
It's still in FY '23. You'll remember we wound up, originally we were proposing and asking to do 1 a year for 3 years. And then because we pushed off capital to the special town meeting in November, we actually asked for and got funding to do 2 of them at once. The thought there was that once you had 2 of them new, you could take the parts from the other 2 that you replaced. And if you had to make a repair on the 3rd one for a year, you could Frankenstein it together. And I think that right now, again, given what we were trying to limit our spending on free cash, as of right now, the 3rd ECO repeater is still in it for FY '23. It hasn't been brought into the FY '22 budget. So,
and I 100% support that. And that was the mindset. It was Capital that brought that up about moving that. I didn't know where they were with that, Joe. So what we'll do is we're going to keep all the parts that we took from the 2 other receivers, and we'll store those. So if something happens to the 1 receiver, we'll be able to scab parts off the 2 other older ones that we have in storage. So that was the mindset behind that. That's the
they ultimately opted not to bring it back into FY '22. Their recommendation to us did not include that. They discussed it, but they chose not to.
So that was the only 2. Those were the drivers. We're always looking to try to bring on partners for regionalization. I think at some point, some of your police departments and some of your dispatchers will stop being dispatch centers, maybe a little more open to regionalization, looking at the, what's happening with the pandemic and how it affected some of these towns. I've always been a supporter of police regionalization. I think it's a good thing. I like the thought of dispatch regionalization. It's trying to get a partner that's willing to do it. And I've been here for going on 12 years, and people will talk about it, but when it comes down to sitting at the table and really having a hard conversation, no one wants to sit. No one wants to actually to make that happen. You don't want to commit.
Chief, do you ever think about some revenues from the departments, such as, like, I know some, mostly fire that I hear about, they'll do clinics at their stations and they'll bring in money from doing clinics or classes, or they'll do consulting on something. Like, I know we're accredited, and many other departments, I would assume with the reforms going on at the state level, that more departments will get a push to be accredited. And have we thought about consulting or working with some type of a help on, what we've done to be accredited in such a high standing police department, or running, training and stuff like that for officers out of our departments?
So as it pertains to accreditation, there's a total of 107 departments that are fully accredited. We were 42nd in the state. Now there's a total of 221 that are in the program, not accredited, but in the program. They're in what we call self-assessment. They want to get accredited. So there was a big move, like you said, Sean, because of police reform. There was a huge move to get accredited. The departments that are accredited, we've already met the standards that police reform is asking us to do. I like it because I think the police reform bill is going to professionalize a lot more of the department. So I'm all for it. How do we generate revenue for that? If a police chief calls me up and says, "Hey, Russ, I'm looking to," and I get these calls all the time, "can I get a copy of your policy and procedures because I want to get my department accredited?" I always give them to them because I want to professionalize. If I can give it to them and they're going to professionalize their department, to me, it's a home run all the way around. The only place we draw revenue is when solicitors permits. We recently increased the fee for solicitors permits, and it's not a huge revenue maker for us at all. Firearms permits. There are a lot more people, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but we almost doubled the amount of firearms permits in town since the pandemic started, people applying for firearms permits. Now, but
Nationwide, by the way, gun sales were up from March through September, nationwide.
right.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to go to a gun store and find ammunition or even a firearm nowadays. They're just, the shelves are bare.
So, but now this is a kicker because it is a state firearms permit, but I'm the licensing authority. So you come down to the PD, you do your application, it's $100. We only get $25 out of that 100. We send 75 to the state, the town retains 25. Those are basically the only two revenue makers we have. Now we do get, although it's not something that I would call a revenue maker because I don't like it. Every car we stop and issue a ticket, the town gets a portion of the revenue from that. I am bigger on education than I am enforcement. I have always been that way. I think you educate operators. Some of these fines, Sean, some of these fines, some people couldn't pay their car insurance. You give them some of these fines like $200 a whack.
Right.
I think you get more as a police officer educating someone opposed to writing the ticket. But we do get money from those. We do get revenues off of tickets too. Those are the only three areas that we have that we can draw revenue off of.
Any other questions for Chief? No?
Nick, none?
You had to go to him, Russ?
I'm always waiting for a question from Nick.
All right,
Actually, I will, before we, sorry, I
Go ahead,
like the idea of merging police departments, and you and I, Russ, have talked about that in the past. So I think it's just a matter of creating a leadership moment. Maybe we could find a way to sit down and talk with the new Wenham Select man and see if he and his FinCom are interested in saving some money, because that DLS study from 2009 showed a substantial savings for both towns. And as Rosie said, it's not like we're 2,000 square miles, so maybe there would be savings for both, automobiles and manpower. But I'm with you on that. I just wanted to let you know.
Oh, I appreciate it. The DLS study was actually very interesting, and the Kennedy School of Business did a study on us too.
Yep.
Hamilton went merging the police departments, and that was a good read as well. I am all for it. If we could just get someone to sit down and have an honest dialogue and be willing to move the dialogue forward.
We tried to push that along last year, the beginning of last year. And we actually tried to set up meetings with the town manager in Wenham, and at that time also the FinCom had no interest in talking to us. And I know Joe and Russ had pushed those issues with them. So it's a little frustrating, because I think ideally, isn't it May that their police chief retires?
Correct.
Yep.
So in May, the current police chief, Chief Perkins, is going to retire. We tried to have these conversations even when the prior chief, Chief Walsh, was getting to retire too, Kenny Walsh. I mean, we do this, ultimately, if we could combine police, fire, and dispatch, all of public safety for the two towns, you would realize the savings. I could do back of the envelope math for you right now and give you a large number between those two towns, how you're going to realize the savings. For fire, it's more or less equipment and combining their full-time staff. For police, we don't need, if we use their full-time staff and our full-time staff through attrition, we don't need as many cops between the two towns.
Right.
So for police, it's salaries and wages you show a savings. For fire, it's more equipment. And for fire, by combining their full-time fire, you'd have better coverage. Because the call vol firemen, that's a little bit of an issue. Some of our call firemen are coming from Danvers.
Yep.
It's not the way it was in the old school when Mac, God bless him, when Mac would come from the shoe store when the whistle went off. It's just not that way anymore for fire.
Yeah. So it's really a matter of getting someone's attention in Wenham and make that up. They have other issues and they don't want to talk to us yet.
Yeah, I think, to Nick's point, we've had that conversation a number of times over the years. I can remember maybe 3 or so years ago, our FinCom's meeting at the COA, with some, I think the chief at the time in Wenham.
Yep.
And it was a non-starter for them. I mean, they entertained us by coming to the meeting, but they were not having it. So, I think it's a conversation that we'll continue to have, and hopefully they'll be involved in it sooner than later if it's going to benefit both of us, but they have to have an appetite for it too. And it doesn't seem they do at the moment, but we'll keep looking at it.
Yeah, I think we keep working it on all fronts. I mean, from the FinCom side, we've got a good working relationship with Wenham's FinCom, and we'll keep pushing the issue with them. It was on the agenda for our meeting last time, but we didn't want to. We pushed it off to a future meeting because we wanted to do a deep dive on it. So we'll do that with the future meeting with them.
Yeah, and plus, I think the time, to Chief's kind of point, is getting kind of right, because we've got a lot of retirements for fire and police chiefs.
Yep.
I think over the last 5 years and the next 5 years, there's going to be a good handful more. So I think a lot of other towns and municipalities will be looking at the same thing. So, all right, if there's no further questions for Chief, we'll move on.
So I'd just like to say thank you, everyone. I'm gonna have to leave because my daughter wants to go visit her boyfriend who lives in Ashland, and I haven't snowblowed the driveway, and she's been pacing back and forth. So I'm gonna have to leave. And Joe, thank you for letting me go before Tim Olson, because the penalty is if you have to watch.
Well,
Very thankful for that.
I'm just gonna say, I think this is the first time you're gonna talk more than I will.
I doubt that, Tim.
I'm going to defend Tim because Russ went on about as long as Tim usually does. So Russ, you've been hanging around.
You used all your time, Tim, so you're all good.
I yield my balance of my time, Mr. Moderator, to Tim Olson.
Thank you. Thanks, Chief.
Bye-bye.
All right. Up next, of course, we have our one and only DPW Director, Tim Olson, to talk about Public Works.
Good morning, everybody. Got some snow. Our guys did a great job last night. Just want to let everybody know they were in probably till early morning. It was kind of a little unexpected, the amount of snow we did get. It was pretty light for a while, but then it picked up. But they were ready to go, and can't say enough about them. So I just want to give them a shout out real quick. Similar to what Chief was saying, I brought my budget back to the pre-COVID model. So you don't really see too many large increases. I just wanted to point out a few maybe differences or discrepancies from that pre-COVID model. Once again, I'm requesting seasonal help. This past year has been very trying on DPW. I know a lot of people were, in homes and wanting to get outside. I think we had probably more use of the Patton Park than in other years, just because people wanted to get out. Unfortunately, we didn't have the help that we had in recent years. So our guys stepped up, did what we can. I know baseball was a big push. Once again, probably just to get outside and get some type of normalcy. But this year, it's a critical piece of our spring, summer, fall operating, having those seasonal. I do budget for 6. I usually get about 4. Hoping to get that 4 again this year. But you will see that seasonal help is back in the budget. The other large, I guess you would say it was a decrease, is we are losing our mechanic after about, I think he's been here about 38 years. So he is retiring at the end of June. So in the mechanic budget, the 425 budget, you will see a decrease in the permanent wages just because of his time here. And I'm hoping to have an advertisement out pretty soon, working with Joe to try to bring somebody on prior to the year end to try to train with Rick for a few months if we can. But that's going to be a big loss. With that, there may be some trickle down. There may be some additional costs with not sure who that candidate would be, but Rick is very fortunate to have Rick. He can do everything that we throw at him. If it's small equipment, heavy equipment, police cruisers, electrical. I can't say that we're going to get the same type of person. We'll look for the best candidate, obviously, but there may be some costs on, additional costs that we have to maybe sub out some of the work. depending on who that candidate is and the experience and knowledge and training that they have. Our DPW, we are going to be going into negotiations with them. So what you would see, you don't see COLA increases in the budget yet. That's for Joe and I to work with and add as we get into, through the negotiating. Cleaning services, I did put back in the budget. They're cleaning of the town hall, of the COA, Patton Park restrooms. I usually do a 3-day-a-week type cleaning schedule. This year, we've had our DPW as well as our facilities tech, Mark Shaw, and helping out with the cleaning, doing the best we can. We have hired some services to sanitize the building occasionally, but Mark has also done it himself. We do have some equipment that we purchased through the CARES money to do that. So, it's probably not, cleaning service is not professional quality, but at the same time, getting the recycling, the trash, the necessities, the major bathrooms, those are cleaned daily. So I think they've done a great job with the time that they have, to do that. I added back in some tree work. We obviously in Hamilton, we know trees, you never know what we're going to get. It's one thing that I don't have the ability to put that into like a snow budget or something like that. But we do get storms. We do have some ongoing maintenance. So it's never enough. We've had some years that we've gone over the budget just because of some winter weather or storm related incidences that we've had. So I did put that back in. Again, this is just pre-COVID budget. Solid waste, you'll see some obviously contractual increases for our curbside collection and disposal fees. They have gone up. I believe our disposal fee went up about 22% from 2 years ago. So we did see a pretty good increase this past year. It is going up. I believe it's like a 2 to 4% increase over the year. Same with curbside. The zero sort is an additional fee that we are paying. It's based upon our residual, basically, if you want to think about it, it's our cleanliness of our recycle. And it's all based on rate and commodity pricing and from China. That actually has gone down quite a bit over the last few months. So it's trending down. It's not, we don't really know what the future holds, but that is a good sign, obviously. But we are putting in the same number this year, just to be conservative and just to make sure we have those costs, just in case there is an increase. The one thing that needs to be known with our pre-treatment system that we are currently under design with and looking to permit, hopefully we get that constructed this year. That's our goal, is this fall. That may bring, not necessarily in this budget, but in the future budgets, that may bring some extra maintenance and repair and supply costs. Just another facility that we have to maintain. We are still working with the engineer to try to figure out what those costs are, but I just wanted to point that out, that it's not reflective on this budget this year, but probably you will see some increases over the next few years in water. Like Joe mentioned earlier, there's no capital this year in water. We're giving a little bit of a breath in the water over the last few years. Since I think 2012, we've done some major work. There was a $10 million bond, as well as a few smaller bonds that we've had over the last few years. And I think it's worth every penny. I think we've done a really good job getting the water back to where I feel, we feel and the town feels and our operators feel is in good quality and the quantity is there. So I think worth every penny. And other than that, I don't really see too many. I mean, I'm here for questions, but I don't really see too many major increases other than, what we've had in the pre-COVID model before. So available for questions.
Tim, the difference in the let's see, 650, the Parks and Fields increase. Did you cover that when you were talking? I can't remember if you did or not. It's up
That's just that's just the seasonal help.
Seasonal help. Okay, that makes sense now. And then the other question I had, it was either for you or Joe. At one point, Casella was charging us kind of a higher rate because they're claiming that our recycling was dirty.
Yep.
And we were going to speak with them about that because in the contract, I believe it's different. So I can't remember where we're at.
Yeah. So our current contract, it's based on the like a commodity index. It's and depending on what the value is of recycling products, paper, plastics, glass, there's all values, and then there's a residual value, which is basically like a blended rate of how clean our recycling is, and that's, I think, what you're referring to. We do pay under our current contract. There is we do pay a certain it's an ACR calculation, average commodity rate, I think, or ratio, I believe it is. So we do pay extra. Joe and I are looking to discuss with Casella. We are under contract with Casella until 2026, but we thought maybe to go back to them, maybe negotiate a new contract with additional terms or new terms that are in most of the new contracts that are being placed and put out there. Those terms would I guess, individualize Hamilton with our recycling and cleanliness. We do a very good job. But right now, the way the contract reads is we are getting a little bit, I said blended rate earlier. So they take a whole bunch of communities and then they charge those communities the same type of residual and ACR type calculations. So we are in a way getting a little bit, we're helping other communities, but getting hurt by other communities in a way, because we're paying sometimes some other additional costs for some extra dirty recycling. The new contract, like I said, would individualize Hamilton. That's the way a lot of the solid waste contracts are going. I did sit on a webinar with DEP, and they do have a very good template that they are advising communities to use. We are planning to then reach out to Casella and try to negotiate new terms, obviously under probably a new contract. But that's something that Joe and I have to sit down and put together.
Yeah, I wanted to clarify too. We did have Tim and I did have a conversation with Jack from Casella about the ACR. And so one of the things that plays into it, right, is there are two things that are covered in the contract that could both be referred to as ACR. There's the average contamination rate, and there's the average commodity ratio. And so one of the things that Jack was able to explain to us in that call is that not all of what we're seeing is related to the contamination rate of our and how it is impacted in the small sub-region. There is an impact from that, but not as great as we at first realized, because some of the impact is from the commodity rate. And as Tim referenced earlier, that's actually been going down, and that's trending in the right direction for us right now. So Jack is open to us having some discussions about a new contract. It's not uncommon to take things up midstream if things are changing, if things are dynamic, and they want to keep us in Wenham, but we need to involve Wenham in that conversation as well. And they're in a state of flux. They're in a search for a town administrator, and they've only got one selectman, so we can't engage in those discussions just yet.
Right.
So in the budget, Joe, we have two lines. We have collection and hauling service, and then below that we have solid waste disposal service. Is the first one the trucks and the people, and the second one the actual weight of the waste, or how do you divide those up, Tim?
Yeah, so the collection is obviously the curbside collection of the recycling, of the trash, and the compost. The disposal line item is when Casella physically brings that over to North Andover or Brick End Farms or wherever that landing place is for that material. And that's what we pay to dispose of the material.
So there's no tonnage built into the collection and hauling. That's just the trucks and the people rolling down the street, correct?
Yeah, that's a lump sum.
That number shouldn't.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a lump sum. The other number may change based on what we actually used, but the other one is a fixed number.
Correct. Yeah, the collection is a lump sum based upon, I think they estimated around 3,000 households at the time when the contract was made. And then the disposal is based on tonnage at a tonnage rate.
And that's brick ends and is built into that as well too?
Yeah, brick ends is where Casella brings the compost, and Casella brings the solid waste to North Andover, Wheelabrator in North Andover. And then they have their own facility for recycling.
All right, any other questions for Tim?
So I had two other questions. The only number that jumped up from pre-COVID numbers was and it's probably the right thing to do, but you still kept money in the budget for pavement, culverts, basin repair. So that sort of number still sort of your post-COVID ask. So that's probably deferred maintenance we need to take care of. You're still asking for like 65,000 or something. So
yeah, that's all, depending on, it's in-house, our guys, repairing. It could also be for contractors, depending on what the work is. But that's just something that I've carried, obviously to maintenance throughout the year. Sometimes if we need to have a grader go on the dirt roads, if they get too bad, we don't have the best equipment for that. We make do, but if I have to hire some contractors to go out there and grade the dirt roads or add material or fix culverts or catch basins, I have that as my, the operating maintenance side of things on the budget. So,
Tim, I'm going back to the seasonal help. I love the fact that we're hiring local kids. But what I noticed was it's in 3 different departments. So the total is about 41,000 for the year. And in 20, not last year, but the year before, I think it was about 15,000 or so. And the year before, it was probably more like 30,000 or excuse me, 29,000. So what is happening this year that we're actually increasing that seasonal prior more than historic? And I'm talking about pre-COVID.
So I've always, if I can remember, I've always budgeted 6. Sometimes I think you're looking at budgeted versus actuals.
Yes.
Budget has always been for 6. Usually 2 in highway, 2 in parks, and 2 in cemetery. I usually only get, like I said, 3 or 4. I would like to get 6, but it's all whoever applies. I do my best I can to advertise for it, but I'm looking for specific, college age kids coming home for break. I have very strict kind of guidelines. I can't hire just seasonal workers. I need to hire kids that have to go back to school. If we hire anybody else, they are, we could be subject to paying them unemployment by the time the season's over. So strict guidelines, they're not exempt employees. I don't have that luxury like some other departments do. These seasonal workers are not doing a seasonal job like a pool director. These seasonal workers are coming in and doing the same jobs as my full-time staff in most circumstances, like weed eating or trimming or mowing or whatever they're doing. So
Okay.
they're not an exempt employee. So the way, what I've been advised to hire and is to advertise for basically students coming home for the break or for the summer that then go back to school, which makes them exempt from any type of.
So what I'm seeing then is that you're budgeting for 6, you may get 4, and so there may be a savings there, but it would show up as a reduction. I mean, a unused line item.
Correct.
And then you'll shift it from some other account.
If needed, no. I like to get 6. I've had 4 last year. I believe I can get 2 or 3 of those 4 back. It's been a while because I didn't hire last year, so I'm hoping that they are still willing and able and wanting to come back. They're a big help for us.
Thank you.
I'm leaving notes, Nick. Do not allow Tim to move money around.
Exactly.
We don't do that. We don't do that. It's not, doesn't get moved around. What generates our free cash?
Right. Any other questions for Tim?
I got a couple. One, I think I know the answer to, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Because the COLAs aren't included in the budget, I assume they're in another reserve, general government reserve. So more of a Marissa, Diane question.
Yeah.
Marissa's not.
That is correct. We have the 148 salary reserve, and that's where all of the estimates are included, not only for the DPW contract, but any other contracts that are open at the time.
Great. And the second one, moving to capital, I think there was a couple line items there. The one question I had, if you could, Tim, if you could talk to the planer attachment, and I see in the slide, I think it's page 148 is the capital program. It listed it as operations. Was that actually in the operations budget? Because I didn't originally know what it was, and I couldn't find it there.
I think what we referred to earlier, that capital is just the sources of the funding are not
set exactly.
That I've talked with Joe. I believe that would be a capital or a Chapter 90 eligible purchase. So Chapter 90 is the state funding for highways and roads and drainage. So I think I know the capital committee likes to show those on the plan, but that would be something that I believe Chapter 90 would be able to fund.
To answer your question, John, in a different way, it is not part of the budget currently.
Okay, so if we didn't use free cash, then it would actually increase the budget. Okay, great.
Well, it won't have to increase our appropriation though, because we believe we know we've got to confirm that we can use state Chapter 90 funds to pay for that. So what we're trying to do is not impact free cash and not impact the budget with that purchase, because that's
okay. Yeah, so if we get the Chapter 90, gotcha. Then it's basically just a offset back into the budget, and then we just offset it with the Chapter 90. Okay.
So any funds that aren't out of free cash, that aren't a one-time purchase, that are part of what we do to operate, I just refer to as operational funds. Chapter 90 is operational.
Has there been have you heard anything about Chapter 90 funding for this year? Will there be any changes in it?
I haven't heard different, so I'm still expecting
the usual amount or whatever that we get, 90 some thousand or something like that. Is that what it is usually?
I think it's more. I think it's closer to I think about 240,000.
Okay, I was way off then.
Yeah.
It's the state, the governor's budget. So obviously the state house is a little bit behind on its budget process. They're usually a little further along by now, but the governor's House 1 budget kind of funded local aid roughly the same that we got funded last year. They didn't really make any significant increases to Chapter 90 funding, so we're expecting that to hold. They haven't talked about changing the formula, and they basically held on the Chapter 90, so we'd expect roughly the same.
Yeah, and just on if we can talk about Chapter 90 real quick, just wanted to give everybody, I have quite a bit of larger projects that are taking up some of that Chapter 90. So the way Tobacco Road is one of them. We haven't bid that project out. I know we do have a town appropriation, but I am also using some Chapter 90 money for design and permitting for that project. So, and then I'm going through a design phase right now on 2021 drainage and paving improvements project. So I'm still trying to design. We haven't costed out any type of construction, but there's other projects that I use the Chapter 90 for. So the planer is obviously something that I've talked to Highway about, that I'd like to purchase and try to, bring that into the equipment and give them a little bit more help with paving and patching and things like that. But it's all kind of fluctuating and could be dependent on how these other projects come in. So.
All right. Anything else for Tim?
I had one question. I'm not sure if it's for Tim or from Marissa or Joe, but just on page 31 of the budget for sanitation, I think we are making a shift from a permanent wage to a part-time wage. Can we talk about that? What was the reason for that? Top of page 31.
I'm getting there. So do you have the line item, Bill? The
15511510010.
That's actually Board of Health.
That's Board of Health. Okay,
Yes, that is Board of Health. I don't know if we want.
gotcha. Yeah, that's just okay. That's just the shift from okay.
You're
I
on.
have one, another, Tim, I do have another question. I'm sorry, Sean.
All right.
We had talked, when we looked at the budgets a while ago, we've talked about it. This may be for Marissa. The fact that the water department was going to get hit up against this need for the reserve, the retained earnings. We're starting to use that. And we were talking about doing an increase this year. And somehow that sounds like it's fallen through the wayside, or are we still?
No, we're just waiting for third quarter commitments to come in. Once I get the third quarter commitments, then we can, well, if Marissa is willing to help, I'll talk with Diane and I'll talk with Joe, and we'll see how it is compared to our the expenses, our projected expenses based on the third quarter. If we have to make the adjustment, it would be on that fourth quarter bill.
You mean in terms of increasing the rate?
Correct.
So that's still an open item for us?
Yep.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think part of it, Nick, was also, since we made a big increase last year, was trying to understand the impact on water usage of changing the rate before we recommended a different increase.
And this year is different, as Marissa was saying earlier. It's a strange year. We're not really sure. I mean, a lot of people have been home. We pushed out a lot of water this year. I'm not sure if that's the trend or if it's just a blip in the, in the actual consumption and usage. But it's going to be a tough year to kind of forecast and use as a model. Not sure what the following year will be. So.
All right. Any more questions for Tim? Nick, you sure? No, that's fine. They're all good questions. They all help out. We have health planning and inspections up next. We had talked previously and planned a little break at 10:30. We are well past 10:30 mark, and we haven't covered one of our agenda items before our scheduled break. What is the general consensus? Do we want to take a short break? Do we want to do health and inspectional services and then take a break? Do we want to just power through? John, any thoughts?
I'm okay to power through, but if anyone needs to take a quick break, then I think I'd be open, but I'm fine powering through, but speak up if you need a break.
I have a computer battery that's decided today that it likes to die. So you may have seen me come and go through the display this morning. Unfortunately, it is plugged in, but for some reason it's deciding it's on its last leg. It might be useful to have me go quickly.
Yeah, I was going to say, to Patrick's point there, maybe we'll move on to Patrick and hopefully he'll be with us through his talk.
Perfect. Yeah.
And he's adding a new computer to his budget.
Yeah, I wish I had.
All right, Patrick. So we have up next health planning and inspection. So why don't you tell us some information?
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for your attention and participation. A few weeks ago, I did have the opportunity to speak with some finance committee members. They helped us out in reviewing what we were doing, where we were going relative to the health department. One of the things that I stressed in that meeting was the fact, and this is a major however, over the last 10, 11 months, Hamilton has probably never seen a time when they've needed a health department fully resourced, fully focused, fully capable to deal with some significant health issues. We haven't had that before, and we've been blessed that that's been the case. We did ask for a significant upgrade in the health department. Talking through it with David Wenger, talking through it with Marissa, it was very apparent that we needed to take a more modest approach, which we did. And what I have before you in the budget is a certainly upgraded, but as I say, modest health department, which takes a lot of the responsibilities for the day-to-day that luckily we've had a very engaged Board of Health chair, or a Board of Health chairman and board over the last several months, but we need to be taking some of the responsibilities off of them and other people. To that effect, we are proposing a 24-hour per week health department director. That person would be at grade 18. We are confident with this greater ability, we can address the broad health issues and the continued effect of COVID on the community. Another element of this is that we're fully recognizing that we have an aging population. We need the health director to be engaging more in dealing with aged issues. As I say, our population is aging in place, and we have more concerns that are affected based on that. You'll also see, and are probably aware, we did have an individual who is an administrative assistant in the health department. She resigned about a year ago. We have had that position vacant since that time. We have had some coverage from other administrative assistants in the building department, in DPW, but again, that's been an incremental interim approach that we need to redo, and we're looking for a 19-hour per week admin assistant to work with the health department. You've also seen there that we've and are aware that we've needed to hire a new local nurse. Very pleased with the individual there. We look forward to having her continue with us. We also, as part of this approach, will be using some consultant services to continue to assist us in addressing septic reviews, septic system renewals, all those kinds of things. Also, we'll be using consultant services on other certain types of inspections. Whether that's food, whether it's pools, or other kinds of things. So that's, in general terms, that's the modest approach that we are proposing to upgrade and up-resource our health department.
Questions for Patrick? That must mean everyone's in agreement. I like it. I think just a general comment on Patrick, with the increase in our kind of reliance on our public health agents and the like. I think spending that money and working on that restructuring is definitely the smartest thing to do. I don't think COVID-19 will be our last pandemic that we face. we've gone kind of 100 years in between pandemics, but all the research I've been looking at as of late says it's not going to be another 100 years. It could be at any time with the way that we're encroaching on all these different wildlife populations and viruses that cross from people to humans or animals to humans. So I think that investing some money into this is going to be well spent.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. This is an evolving dynamic in a way that we really don't know where it's going. You know, this and as you've heard before, hope is not a strategy. We need to have someone with the ability and a department that has the ability to focus on it. And again, I really applaud the Board of Health. They've certainly stepped up in a huge way. And it's important that we start to take some of that off of them where it's appropriate to do so.
Could I jump in here? Something related, but not specific to this year's budget request. In looking forward to health too, I thought I'd let the board in the Finance and Advisory Committee know today. Earlier this week, we were notified by the state that through DPH, there's going to be a grant fund available to help municipalities that want to look at their public health delivery and help with models that might help them expand their ability to meet public health demands without major, huge investments, i.e. regionalization. So we have already reached out to Wenham, and we're going to be scheduling an initial conversation next week with us and Wenham to talk about how we could apply for those grant funds to do to look at a regional solution to help both towns' health departments. So that's that was just available this week. That's one of the things that, like, when we say everything's not finalized or there's always things in flux, it wouldn't affect the FY22 budget, but we're definitely in continuing to look at how we can better provide for the public health needs of our community and our residents. We're going to be looking at other options, including potential for regionalization. Hopefully we'll be eligible for this grant and we'll be able to bring it home.
I think that's really good. I think of the success of our vaccination clinics that we've had with partnerships. You know, there's kind of strength in numbers there. The more kind of brains you have in the room, the better off you're going to be. So I think that anything we can do to take advantage of that for fiscal responsibility and just health and human services is a win-win. Right. Any other questions, comments for Patrick while he's here?
Yeah, I have a question. I'm just trying to understand. I know that we had talked about perhaps reorganizing our human rights or public health services, and so I'm wondering where this plan and this increase in staffing falls in that continuum. I'm not sure I understand where this new position is going to be. Is it going to be in the public health nurse? So maybe you could just educate me about that, Patrick.
Yes, this is a health department director position, and it is a different individual than the public health nurse.
Okay, and okay, so this is a new position?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
But let me say that we have been utilizing a health department agent who has been part-time for a number of years. Her focus has been probably 80% regarding septic system review, evaluation, etc. And I think that there were a lot of areas health-wise that really we didn't have the ability to focus on because of the heavy focus regarding septic systems. So, you know, this is definitely a better resourcing of a health focus for the community, which we really believe to be a quality of life component of our community, and particularly as we age in place.
Okay, well, thank you. So I'll ask you, how does this role cross over to the public health nurse and the council on aging responsibilities. I'm just trying to understand
Sure.
what exactly this person would be doing.
This person would be overseeing health functions of the community, would be dealing with COVID, would be dealing with our issues related to the composting facility, would be dealing with Triple E, would be dealing with health matters related to the water bodies in the community, would be overseeing the consultants, as I mentioned, that we'll continue to use regarding septic, regarding food inspections, pool inspections. This director also would be overseeing the public health nurse and working hand in hand with this person because they need a lot more backing up than what we've had the ability to give them heretofore. That's been part of the demand that's been placed on the Board of Health, is helping the local nurse with support and decision-making ability and those kinds of things which the public health agent right now hasn't really had the ability to do. So we're taking that more seriously because the demand's more serious.
Okay, I just, my comment would be that COVID, although it's certainly devastating, it is a finite activity affecting the public health. And because I have not seen this plan, and I apologize if I should have been a little more careful about looking at it. To me, it seems fairly redundant. Our public health nurse through the years that I've been helping out with programs in the town, quite competent, quite impressed, and it just seems like we keep adding to our administrative costs. And I can't speak to a lot of things in town. I don't know about public safety. I don't know about fire departments, but I do know about health. And I just question the necessity of having a public health director. And I will certainly follow this up with Joe. But I think the more, we should be geared to what do we need versus what are we staffing for a worst case scenario. And perhaps my mind will be changed listening in more detail about the justification for this. But I'm always looking to economize, and I know how competent our public health department is. I know how competent our David Smith is in our health department. So those are my comments. Thank you for answering.
You're welcome. But
I'd like to
that I think is really important to point out is that the public health nurse, the individual in that capacity right now and the one prior, yes, this is during the era of the pandemic we're dealing in, but they haven't had the level of professional support that they've truly needed. And there has been a significant level of inability to give them the backstop and support that they've needed.
I think Patrick left on my.
Finally lost Patrick.
If I could pick up on the thread of what he was saying.
Mid-sentence.
Yeah.
If I could pick up on the thread of what he was saying, I think that prior to this year, Patrick at the beginning of his explanation of the budget referenced the fact that we had a full-time clerical position working in the health department, and along with some part-time people and some stipended positions. Prior to this year, the only full-time person in the department was the clerical position. we were not able to provide a high level of proficient and professional support to the people in the department and to the functions that needed to be followed. And as we looked at after that retirement last year, as we looked at how could we rebuild the department back in a better way, obviously, I know several of us, I mean, I had released a proposal that I realized at the time was a grand thought and was a large scale thing, and probably a little too expensive for us, particularly in this year and given the financial challenges we're facing. So, you know, I listened to the FinCom and we went back to the drawing table and we downsized it. What we're doing is not what we talked about initially. The initial proposal was just an idea. Let's get talking about it. What we've done is reassess where the hours need to be. And the hours don't need to be 37 and a half hours on a clerical position. The hours need to be more on the line of a professional public health person to be able to look forward for us and help manage the flow of the work in the department with public health in mind. And so we're proposing to change the health agent to a health director and return a half of the time, 19 hours a week, clerical position. So we're still at lower, we're still at far lower numbers from a full-time equivalence perspective than we were prior to the pandemic. Not in a year over year, because we lost that position and never filled it last year. But we know that we need clerical assistance for that department, and we know that we need a little bit better, handle on how we're addressing public health going forward. So the proposal here doesn't really add staff; it just kind of reorganizes responsibilities and roles.
Right, but it does add, if I'm reading on the correct line here, it adds $56,695 to the budget. Am I correct in that, or am I reading the wrong line?
It adds $56,000 to the budget over this year, but remember, we cut funding for a clerical position that was about almost $50,000 and didn't replace it. So it's slightly more than it would have been if we had had that clerical position in place, not a giant jump.
But then we'll need a clerical position too.
That's in the budget. So that's in the budget. Okay. It's there for 19 hours a week, not 37 and a half.
Okay.
I'd like to say that I echoed that Rosie's concern only because we start thinking about every time you add a head, that tends to grow. But I did like your conversation about regionalizing, and that is something that I think we can begin to. I think Rosie's correct. We should look at it more closely. But the regionalization is, and if you can get funding elsewhere, then we have something that we can, if we can get that funding in perpetuity, because sometimes we do things where we can get a person for a year or 2 years funded outside, and then suddenly we lose that funding, and now we say it's a necessity and we have to pay for it in the future. So it's important that we look at that, both the regionalization and the funding. And I'm going to defer to Rosie because of her expertise in the health area, the nursing side.
Well, again, I think I've worked with our public health nurses for several years now, as my time allows, and I'm just amazed at their ability to organize and execute issues, to do outreach to people. We also have the capabilities of the Council on Aging. It certainly is a nice concept. I think we should look at it more carefully and institute things based on a proven need rather than something that is a great model. I mean, we're a small town and we just keep building and building positions on. And again, I can't comment on other areas. I just think we should look at this more closely before we decide to institute this change.
And we've got, I think Patrick is somewhat back on there. He was on the phone, now he's back on his computer. So if we have any other questions for him, since he's back.
Yeah. So my question is, are we adding a position? Because my understanding is we're taking away the health agent and we're reducing the admin and changing it. So we're structuring.
We're exchanging, right? We're exchanging for a slightly higher price. I think we're cutting 50,000 and putting back in 56 for a new position, but we're not filling the old position.
And when we
Right.
talked about this in detail, I had the same concern, that this was a reaction to the pandemic, but I was convinced that this would be a beneficial restructuring, even aside from the pandemic. I don't think it takes anything away from what the nurses do. I don't think they're saying that this is taking away any responsibility of the nurses. It's giving them more, giving the public health nurse more support to be able to do what she needs to do, and to take off some of the, honestly, you're not always going to have a chairman of the Board of Health like Mr. Smith. I think he's taken on a lion's share of the work, and that's not always going to be available. So somebody has
him would be way over budget.
Right. And when I think to Christina's point, I would say this change is and isn't COVID related. I see it as COVID allowed us to see some of the deficits in what we've had. Not that people weren't competent in doing their job, but with the added nuances of COVID and contact tracing and hours and everything like that, it's shown us that our health department and our health agents need that support and that background knowledge, because we were just kind of thrown into this, and no one had any idea what to do. We just kind of, not that we made it up as we went, but we got what guidance we could from CDC and everything like that, but it's ever evolving. So having somebody else there that is a professional in this is only helpful.
Well,
so yeah, my conclusion is I was skeptical too, and I was convinced that this much pared down plan was a good way to go.
well, just a comment again, most of the work that's done requires a lot of admin backup, and we continue to make our departments, and I will speak only of my area, we make our departments top heavy, but it does not allow for a continued increasing need at the administration level, at the admin assist level. I do strongly feel that I'm not convinced that this is a necessary position and that we should look at it more closely. I have not had the benefit of the FinCom looking at it, and so we've had varying opinions on the necessity of it, but it's a substantial increase when you think about the lack of admin assist, and I think that we should really look at it more carefully. Again, I do think that the people who are running public health department, the public health nurse right now, they are extremely competent. And again, I urge us not to consider a major or a significant restructuring, which will increase top-heavy salaries without looking at a finite reality of this COVID pandemic, and things will settle down. So anyhow, that's my opinion. I think it's probably an unnecessary expense right at this time.
Thank you, Rosie. Any other questions for Patrick or comments? All right, and Rosie, I'd encourage you to follow up with Joe and get a copy of the proposal and talk through it with him and see if you change your mind, and if not,
Sure.
Come back to us and we can discuss it some more.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you, Patrick.
You're welcome.
All right. And forgive me, I don't have my agenda up.
Planning was next.
Planning, yes. Thank you, Patrick.
Yeah. In a nutshell, the planning budget is virtually the same as it's been for the 6+ years I've been here. The one difference is that we do have an individual now, Ann Schlecht, who does our minutes. She's at a lower rate than what the prior individual was at. So there's a bit of a change there. We did scale back a little bit on some of the workshops, some of the in-state travel money, I believe. So that budget's effectively the same as it's been for several years now.
Any questions? All right, moving on. What do we have next here?
Inspectional services.
Inspectional services, right?
Yeah. The inspectional services department is just now experiencing another building inspector who has resigned for another position elsewhere. But as we've focused on our approach, we haven't really had the ability to do certain things as well as we'd like, which is address zoning compliance, assisting planning boards, assist zoning boards, help in the production of legal decisions coming from both of those boards, be able to provide testimony to those boards as well. And as you probably well remember, the towns of Hamilton and Wenham are in a intermunicipal agreement structure for its building inspectors, whether it's the building, gas and electric, or the gas and plumbing. So what we have done is we're going to be, now that there have been 3 years of the program with the town of Wenham heading the department, Hamilton will be heading it for the next period, which I'll be part of and overseeing. We do intend to hire an individual that we would like to have at the building commissioner level. This is upgrading that position to a grade level 18. We are again working with the town of Wenham on this. The reasons that I'd mentioned a while ago, that's important for us to be able to have a more senior individual is quite valid, I believe, because we're going to be seeing some more complex projects than the basic home expansions than we've seen here and up heretofore. I do anticipate some real complexity of construction coming at us regarding the Corden Conwell project. They do anticipate doing major residential reconstruction of their units. This is going to be something that is above and beyond what the skill level has been of the individuals we've had in the position. So we really think that having a person at the building commissioner level is highly important for everybody's sake. We'll continue to keep the part-time electrical inspector and plumbing and gas inspectors levels as they are right now. We currently have a full-time administrative assistant in the inspectional services department, which will remain as well. So that's in general terms what the budget includes.
Thank you, Patrick. Questions?
One more of a comment, I think, than a question, but so because we're now operating inspectional services, we obviously remove the assessment part of the budget, but have to add in wages. But there also would be a offset on the revenue side from getting the assessment from Wenham, correct?
Correct.
So
Yes.
this is really a net gain for Hamilton when you look at inspectional services as a unit. it shows a $7,000 increase, but it's really actually a positive, whatever the Wenham assessment would be, minus that 7.
And as a side note to FinCom members, Board of Selectmen members, we have looked at our building permit fees as part of our earlier discussion. We are at $10 per thousand. We've seen a lot of our neighboring communities at 12, and I'm in preparation of a recommendation to all of you folks to see that number go to 12. Not again to be outstripping or trying to be punitive to development construction projects, but to try to help ourselves out, as well as being, consistent and with the fee structures of communities around us.
I think that's good, Patrick. I think it was a few years ago we looked at that fee structure, and we were well behind most communities of our comparable size and development level. So, it's good from time to time to update.
Yeah, in about every 3 years, which is the duration that we've had this fee structure in place, you want to take another look at it and see if it needs to be upgraded. So we're at that point. I can recall Darcy was on the FinCom at that point and certainly helped us take that over the finish line then, and hopeful that we can see some upgrading with that in the near future.
All right, any other things for Patrick before we move on? All right, thank you so much, Patrick. Much appreciated.
I'd like to just answer John's question, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
So on the assessment, you are correct. There is an offset on the revenue side. Currently, the assessment based on how the budget is presented right now, the assessment would be that we would be collecting approximately $81,000 from the town of Wenham, and the cost to the town of Hamilton would be about $110,000.
Right.
Yes. And comparing it to this year.
All right, thank you, Marissa. Up next, we have Recreation. I know we have Sean on the line.
Hey, everyone. Hey, Marissa. Very quickly, you're one of the smaller budgets here in town, so hopefully this won't take too long. But just a couple, a couple of the increases that we have. I think everything is pretty much in line with, what we've done in the past. There is an increase in our custodial budget line. We're looking to possibly, or we're looking to change our custodial service, our custodial company. We're not pleased with the custodial service we're receiving now, but I do believe our custodial service, especially in these times, can be a little bit better. So we're looking at a slight increase, or an increase of about $1,000 on a custodial line. And then also, depending upon, I know Tim had talked about possibly, adding custodial in his budget. So if that does go forward and does pass, we're looking to kind of make our custodial service in line with his custodial service. So we would still have to go through the procurement process for that. So there is a chance that, that $1,000 process might be reduced. And then really the only other two increases that we have are due to COVID in our professional employment training and our travel. So certainly we didn't travel to any conferences this year or this past year. Hopefully next March is when we have our conferences. Hopefully we'll be able to travel to those. And then again, we move normally, Danielle, who works in my office, and myself attend the conferences. We made the change last year when we were making cuts to only provide the conference to myself, but we're looking to put that back in the budget next year to include both Danielle and myself attending the professional conferences. So, really other than that, there's not much of a change really in any of the the line items. So those are kind of the three increases that you see in the reasoning behind those. So, like I mentioned, we only have about 8 or 9 line items. So not a huge budget. And of course, we're a regional department. So, it's usually about a 65-35 split between Hamilton and Wenham on the final number. So I don't know if anyone has any questions. It's pretty straightforward.
Any questions for Sean? Comments? I think the only thing, and I mean, it's budget related, but not budget related. We've got the warrant article for combining the pool revolving and the general revolving fund for the rec. I think that will help us with our budgets. And also, I think we're going to probably see a pretty good size increase in programming this summer if things are a little bit more back to normal-ish. We had quite a drop last year, and I don't know when signups start, but I'd imagine people will start thinking about it fairly soon.
Correct. Yeah. So we're in the midst of planning kind of our summer playground park camp program. I have a meeting with Rachel Lee and David Smith next week just to talk about things that they would like to see in place based upon the guidelines released by the state. We're going to release that information probably in the next 3 weeks with registration starting up shortly thereafter. So, I did speak to the Board of Selectmen and at the joint FinCom meeting about the idea of combining the revolving funds, which I think was, positively met. So I think that's going to help us move forward. And then, with our pool program, we probably won't release that information as soon as the camp program. I think we're going to wait a little while to see how things turn out because the way that we operate the pool could change or could, differ, depending upon how far we go down, whether we're a reservation-based program or if we can operate, as close to normal as we have in the past. So we're probably going to wait a little bit on the pool before we get that information out. But certainly the information for our park program, we're planning on getting out fairly soon.
And I'd also kind of add, Sean, just kind of future casting here. You're talking about the pool and the usage this summer. I think you're going to have to do some creative thinking on fee structure and stuff like that. I'd encourage you to pull all your past membership and stuff like that on what their thoughts are if they're going to want to use the pool this summer. Even if you had kind of a meeting with the rec department before you put the poll out on what questions to ask and say, what would limit you to using the pool? Would it be a fee? Would it be a time? Would it, what's the willingness to pay another $10 or something like that for a visit if you get a certain time slot? Some things like that I think would help you figure that fee structure out and how you're going to do it, once you figure out all the state regulations for running it.
Yeah, sure.
Because that's pretty dependent on your park program too, is that pool. So
correct. So that's another thing that we need to kind of work out. One of the reasons that we chose not to run the camp last year was that the camps were not allowed to use what they call communal pools. So we'd either have to be a camp pool or a community pool. So we're hoping that's not the case this year. Certainly, I think that would, that's kind of a big thing that we need to talk about with our health folks, in regards to that. So, the main thing, with the pool is, capacity limits. The capacity limits will basically dictate how we have to operate. So last year was 40%, which would have been about 40 people. So that's, that basically tells us, we have to go in a reservation based. If it goes to 75%, 80%, 100%, then we can operate how we normally have in the past. So really that capacity limit for the pool is huge for us and how we operate. So, we're still awaiting and hopefully, that capacity limit gets, to at least 70%. I think if we're at 70 to 75, we can operate on a sort of a more normal, normal operation.
All right. Anything else for Sean other than me making him talk longer? I apologize. All right. Thank you very much, Sean.
All right. Great. Thanks, everyone.
Up next, we have Council on Aging. We have Mary Beth with us today. Mary Beth, you want to give us some information?
Yep. Thanks, everybody. Good morning or almost afternoon. Like Sean's department, recreation, We're one of the smallest departments in the town. And we really haven't had much of a change that's occurred in our budget this year. And it's pretty much in line with what we've done in the past. If you look at the line items, there are a few things that we do need to address. I was just texting with Marissa. We did pick up an error in the recreation program expense line item. There was at one, do you remember last year when we put the Beauport costs into this line item? Well, CATA, Cape Ann Transportation Authority, is now currently handling our senior transportation. So Marissa, or Diane in this particular case, sorry about that, Marissa, will be withdrawing 5250 from that line item because that was kept in erroneously when the budget was submitted.
Right, so that's a reduction because the CATA is covering it with the state, right?
Right, and the money that Beauport, that we were paying Beauport, hadn't gotten backed out at this point. So we just caught that this morning. So that'll be changing. Second change is that you'll see a brand new line item that's been created for the Council on Aging for MIS and software services. This is amount of $1,200 is for an annual service fee, software maintenance fee with my senior center. Back about, I want to say maybe 3 months ago or so, we were given a gift by our area agency on aging, Senior Care, and they gave us $5,000. And not every one of the 9 councils on aging within their area, service area, received this check. We received actually the first one. So when I spoke to everybody at Senior Care, and I wanted to get a sense, you know, these were dollars that were coming from the federal government, from the CARES Act. They received them. They wanted to help us out in a way that, you know, they knew that we could. And one of the things that I have been asking for coming upon, this is, I think this is my 12th budget, if I'm not mistaken, 11th or 12th, is that the My Senior Center software program is something that's important for us. And so the $5,000 that was donated or given to us by Senior Center is going to be purchasing that system for us. What this is a system that allows not just the people that are coming in to retain information. So if you're coming in, you have a key fob like you do from CVS. You put the key fob under the laser fiche and you just say, hey, Mary Beth, you're here. What are you here for today? Well, I'm going to do lunch and then I'm going to stay for the movie. Great, click, click. Your numbers are automatically collected. But on the other side, for the people that are working there like myself, and also for if the nutrition wanted to pick up a piece of it or CATA wanted to pick up a piece of it, certainly we're going to be having outreach picking up their piece, or for anyone else working in the department, you're able to capture your actual numbers in real time so that when you're on the phone with someone and that's a contact point, you're able to plug in what that call was all about, whether it was a duplicated call or an unduplicated call. And the other thing that I'm really, really excited about with this software system is that much like our Code Red, we have the ability now to do our own robocall, if you will, to our seniors. So anyone that's in the system age 60 and older will automatically be receiving phone calls from my senior center to let them know what it is that's going on. If there's something important they need to know, or something's changed, or an activity has been canceled. You know, we were always struggling in the past to contact people in a timely fashion, and now it's been given to us. In the past, the newsletter has really been the one way that we can contact people, and that's done so far ahead of the loop, generally 2 months ahead. It's kind of hard to keep up with current information. So we're being given that ability to do that, and that is just a really wonderful tool in our tool belt that we're looking forward to utilizing. So that's the increase that you'll see coming through in that new line item. The other change that you'll see is that the formula grant is not being allocated anymore to the director's salary, but is being allocated to the social services specialist position. And that formula grant is approximately $16,000.
What's the lifetime on that grant, Mary Beth? Is it Is it a
The
refresh
formula grant is every year.
every year, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mary Beth submits to the state the activity of the center and how many people that she's served over the previous year, et cetera. And there's a formula that the state uses based on the information that's turned in annually that gets us that amount of money. So it's a lot of work on Mary Beth's part.
Right. As long as I've been doing this job here and elsewhere, we have received those dollars, and those dollars have been flowing into the separately into each town. The good thing is that, Sean, is that we're anticipating with the completion of the 2020 census that our number is going to change, because what's happened is that those formula grants are predicated upon the number of seniors that are captured in January every 10 years. Well, the problem is for Hamilton, our population, a good chunk of them, somewhere close to 500 of our seniors, generally go elsewhere for January. So this was an interesting year to see how many, even though it's the census started before the COVID hit and people were not traveling, it's going to be interesting to see just exactly how that balances out and how the numbers are going to pick up. But we are anticipating, right now, I think we're somewhere at 26, almost 27% of the overall population in Hamilton. So all of us are anticipating somewhat of an upward trend of about 1 to 2%, which is significant.
Right. And that'll result in some more dollars from that matrix in the state.
Yes. Currently, we're receiving $12 per senior.
Any questions for Mary Beth on budget?
Yes, I have more of a bigger picture question. Is this a department, Mary Beth, that's ripe for merging with Wenham?
So that's an interesting question, Nick. When I first started here in 2012, the reason that I was hired, I ran both councils on aging. I ran Hamilton and I ran Wenham. And I was asked to put together a business proposal that would merge the two communities. And so in May or June of 2013, I presented that proposal to both the town administrator and the then town manager in Hamilton. And it didn't take but 6 seconds for both sides, both towns, to say, that's just not happening. The proposal was kind of interesting because what I envisioned was the senior center in Hamilton would always remain and take care of both Hamilton and Wenham. But the senior center in Wenham would become something that we still very desperately need in this area, which is a daycare center for our seniors, respite care, so that we are able to offer social services and some type of a meal or something along those lines. Not digging into not to get too much into the weeds on this, but just the ability to also have a revenue center that would allow us to create some funding for ourselves. And currently, there's nothing like that between Gloucester and all the way down in Peabody. So, but both towns, unfortunately, it was the Hatfield-McCoy feud going on at the time. And so, with the same, response that they had many years ago to the merging of the police departments and the fire departments, they just said no. And at that point, Wenham went ahead and hired their full-time director, Jim Reynolds. Hamilton went ahead and hired me as the full-time director in Hamilton. But there is certainly a discussion that could be held going down the road with respect to merging the two. Although the business report that was done many, many years ago discussing the police and fire did draw the conclusion that no dollars were to be saved by the merging of the two at that time. My report was also showing the same, but creating a revenue source for us with creating this daycare for seniors over in the Wenham COA.
If you took away the daycare, then there would be a savings.
You're now talking, well, there's 2,000 seniors in Hamilton, and you've got 2/3 that many in Wenham. And I'm not entirely certain that, given that I struggle on many days to take care of 2,000 seniors myself, I'm not entirely certain that a director could handle that many seniors.
Okay,
You
thank
would
you.
have, you'd have to go back and look at your staffing very
Yeah.
much.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much, Mary Beth.
Thank you, guys. Have a great Saturday.
You too.
Thanks, Mary Beth.
Thank you.
Right up next, we have
I just want to mention, Mary Beth was a trooper. I think she was the first person on this call this morning, so.
Right, she was.
She's hung in there.
All right, up next, we have Town Clerk budget. We have Corinne with us today. Welcome, Corinne.
Good morning, everybody. I guess now I can say almost good afternoon for sure, right? Good to see everybody. I want to start by saying I've been absolutely honored to be serving as the Hamilton Town Clerk, and what a 7 months it has certainly been. There's a lot more, and I've spoken to a few of you, there's a lot more to the role than I certainly ever imagined. We automatically associate clerks with voter registration and elections, of course, but what I'm learning more and more about is the daily record keeping. I mean, that really becomes the second large bucket of what clerks are responsible for. So it's the public records, it's the licensing, it's the vital record side of things that are truly equally important to the elections that we kind of all are that much more familiar with. On a daily basis, I get to work with like eight or so different state agencies, whether it's them giving me new instructions or directions on what I'm to do or what is due to them. It's really great. It's great stuff. And continuing to learn about all those responsibilities. So what you see for the budget for the upcoming year, it's about $175,360, which is a decrease of $36,000 or 17% from FY21. Not surprising though, because we know that every year varies depending on how many elections there are. In FY22, there will be fewer elections. But recently, the budget in Hamilton has varied from year to year because of other key things too. As we know, the clerk's employment status changed from year to year, and therefore the number of hours the clerk was working. And then of course, the last but certainly not least, the changes to the election laws at the state level. Many of you know I was a budget analyst early in my career, so I've enjoyed trying to dig in and understand the numbers. In FY20, Hamilton had a part-time interim clerk with 2 elections and 2 town meetings, so costs were down. This year, FY21, I jumped in certainly full-time with 4 elections, the 2 state elections and the 2 local elections, and 2 town meetings. And adding to that were the increased costs of the COVID-related election law changes, vote by mail, and the in-person early voting for both the primary and the general elections. So FY21 costs were definitely up. I built the FY22 budget recognizing that the clerk's job is now indeed full-time, a full-time dedicated person there for 40 hours a week. It had always been budgeted at 37.5, the only department head that wasn't budgeted at 40 hours. And after talking to a few people about that, it seemed like there wasn't a true explanation for that going back in time. So it is budgeted as a full-time job. And then FY22, I built it based on 1 election, which is our local election in May, and 2 town meetings. But there are 2 things that aren't in there, so we have to be aware of that. If the town hall building renovation debt exclusion vote takes on its own independent election again, that will have to be addressed. And the legislature is in the process of adopting as permanent all the changes to the election laws that were put in place for the COVID-related considerations. So the cost attributed to vote by mail will now have to be built into the budget, and assuming that they change that law in the immediate future, even our local election in May, I'm going to have to worry about putting out a request to folks for requesting a ballot by mail and have to get those all out. And then the in-person early voting as well. Back in time, it was only a 7-day requirement for the general election. But what they did this past year and what they're likely to make permanent is 7 days for the primary and 14 days for general elections. And as a clerk on the Cape recently said, 14 days of early voting is literally running an election every day over 14 days, not to mention election day itself. So the demands and the costs are going to continue to go up. So I just want to point that out. I'll be watching the changes in the legislation closely. And with that, people wonder, what does an election cost? It's somewhere around $8,000, maybe $8,500. I think that's about what I spent on the debt exclusion vote. And that was with abbreviated, no, it wasn't abbreviated, it was reduced numbers of poll workers that were required, because the number of poll workers is actually spelled out in law. But for COVID-related things, the legislature did allow us to cut back. We didn't have to have the 2 poll workers at the checkout table. So if that stays in there, that reduces a cost. But if they put that back in, that increases a cost. So a lot of it's absolutely in law, not a lot of flexibility on our end. So I'm happy to take any questions that folks have if I can answer them.
All right, questions, comments?
Not even like what I'm going to have for lunch? Nothing?
Well, you inviting us over for lunch? I mean,
Yeah.
then I'm very much interested in what you're having.
Yeah, there you go.
I would like to, express to the FinCom and the Board of Selectmen that, particularly during this year with the COVID, the additional expenses put on elections by the state and elsewhere. Corinne was also very good about looking for additional outside funding. She acquired a couple of grants, and there was some money from the state Secretary of State to help with the elections. She made sure that Hamilton got its share of those things. So that helped defray some of the additional expenses, and appreciate her ability to recognize that and go after it.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Corinne, for that. I think that's a trend that I think is probably going to stick around is all these new voting regulations. So we need to figure out how to bake that into our budget, or really lobby the state or the feds for some type of a help, with that added fee, because it does add quite a bit, as Corinne mentioned. All right, anything else? All right, thank you, Corinne, very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Corinne.
All right, up next, I think we just have a wrap up, final questions, and then adjournment. So if anybody has any comments or general questions, now is the time. And I would say if you have one of those moments where you're like, I know there's something I forgot, please email Joe or myself, or I'm assuming John as well. We'll take some emails if you have any questions, and we'll do our best to answer them if we can't answer them today.
Definitely.
Everybody's speechless.
Nick,
come on, Nick.
I'm speechless because about halfway through this, we were like an hour behind, and it looks like we're gonna pretty much wrap up on time. So I don't know how that happened. I'm very
pleasantly surprised, right? I think, I guess if you do have any questions that do come up, I'm going to look through it one more time, and I'll probably have some questions I'll follow up with Joe about. But I think other than that, if anybody has anything to add, you're welcome to add it.
Just a highlight, did we in any way identify reductions here? I don't think we did. I think we've accepted almost everything. Just want to be clear in my head.
Well, we've had, I guess, I guess previous to this meeting, we've shifted the health and human services reorg a bit. We've cut an admin position and added a position with that reorganization. Yep. That kind of is almost a net zero. We've held off on some capital items, but we've replaced a lot of capital items that we've, as Bill mentioned earlier, that kind of deferred maintenance part. We've added back in one of the cruisers that we didn't have last year. So we've kind of filled in some of those gaps, but I don't think we've had much reduction overall, other than all the kind of pencil sharpening we've gotten to before this point. There's a lot of that.
That's what I'm wondering. Within this discussion, was there anything that we had, did we ever look at anything and say, yeah, we're going to change this or we're going to change that? I don't think so, huh?
I don't think so.
Okay.
No, I would agree. And I think but we're sort of at the end after, a multi-layered process. I mean, all of our FinCom departmental meetings, most of those had, minor cuts associated with them or, relooking at the numbers to get to where we are right now.
Right. I think it just kind of goes to show that we've really worked hard at getting it to this point of a percentage that, in years past, we have come to this meeting and we've made different cuts through different discussions, which is totally well and good. But I think we've done a really good job with our department meetings with FinCom and stuff like that to get things down to where they're a digestible amount.
Completely agree. I mean, I think the process is actually very good now. Looking back on where we were sort of, 5-6 years ago, it was a much different process and more.
I think that's what we've been trying to, certainly in my time here, what we've been trying to work on is a process that is iterative and changes as we go through it. I don't, just presenting to you what we think we should spend as an administration and saying, here, what do you think? And then having to deal with all the cuts and everything else, it almost winds up feeling contentious, and this should be collaborative. So I much prefer the way we've been going while we've been here. I think it's been easier, and it allows us to have more thorough conversation as well. It's in one meeting in 3 hours, it's tough to really get into all the nitty gritty, but we've had several smaller meetings over the last 2 months. And I think that's what's helped us get to this point. So.
And I think part of it will come when we know more about the school budget, and then whether we have to go back and figure out other plans for what our budget is. And also, what was I going to say there? I lost my train of thought, but I think that's going to come too. And I think some of the items that we have on one-time expenditures and capital things, where we'll spend that money, whether it comes out of free cash or goes to general appropriation, and those kind of decisions, some of those still need to be made. So things will change a little bit, but, I think we're pretty close. And, the comment on spending free cash, we've been much better at budgeting, but it limits our free cash. So it's not a catch-22, but it's almost a catch-22 because we're doing a much better job at keeping the tax rate down, even though it's going up. And we're having less free cash to spend on those kind of items. And that's why we've rejiggered our financial policies to have the capital stabilization fund and, all those other things that were kind of these safety nets for us. So I think we're doing well.
Yeah. And I think we had put a target on free cash spending. And I mean, sort of out of pocket, not counting the $350,000 transfer to stabilization fund for capital items. Looks like we're probably going to be lower than that because some will be operational. And I think that 500,000, because we had free cash from last year more than anticipated, it's appropriate, but not every year we can necessarily spend $500,000 in cash on capital items. So the fact that we're potentially going to be below that is good. And I think we're at an appropriate level there.
Any other comments or questions? Yeah, Marissa?
Thank you. I just would like to say that some of these numbers are still in progress. We actually just yesterday we got some numbers on the Essex Aggie, so the numbers have changed. It is about $20,000 higher than what we had initially estimated at. So as we continue to get information, I know we're still waiting on the health insurance. We're still waiting on the assessments from the town of Wenham. So I just wanted to point that out, that some of these numbers will change as information comes in. The other big item that, I don't know if a decision has been made or not, but when it is, if you could just let the finance department know, would be whether you're planning on bringing the town hall project back at town meeting, because this budget does not include a debt service payment on that project. And that's not necessarily a small number. You're probably talking about $100,000 on that first payment, on that first interest payment. So I just don't want people to start thinking of, oh, we need $192,000. That might not be the right number. As of right now it is, but if you add the town hall project, that puts another $100,000 in. Then you have all these other small changes that are going to be coming in throughout time. So I just wanted to point that out.
You must have been reading my notes, Marissa, because I had the Essex Aggie down in my notes today, and you answered part of the question. The other one was, when they built that new facility, they had some debt service on that, and I can't remember. That was like a 30-year debt exclusion that we're paying a portion of. I can't remember the number. I have to look it up. I don't know if you knew offhand.
Yeah, we pay about, I think for FY22, the debt payment is about $25,000. I do not have a debt schedule that would show me when that debt is coming off the books. So I don't have the answer to that, but the debt estimate for FY22, based on their preliminary budget that I just got yesterday, is about $25,000.
Anything else? I'd like to add before we do adjourn that I just want to really thank Marissa for joining us today.
Yep.
On her Saturday when she's really no longer on our conference. And just really say, I hope I speak for all of us, the appreciation that we all have for all the hard work you put in for this budget and every other budget and every other little detail that we never even hear about, and all the demands that the FinCom and the Board of Selectmen put on you over the years. We really appreciate it. And we're really happy to see you moving on, but at the same time, very sad to lose your professionalism and quality of the way you do your job. We just really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I'm sure, I know for a fact that I'm going to miss Hamilton. It wasn't an easy decision to begin with. And, I'm available with any questions that you might have, anything that I can help with. I definitely willing to do it. And it's been a pleasure working with all of you, and hopefully I'll get to see you, in some meeting, or all paths will cross.
There's another layer of Marissa's dedication to us here, even though she's no longer going to be with us, working for us permanently. She had agreed to come today. And then when she went out to her garage to unlock the garage and come drive here, her garage door did not open. She was not able to get in. She actually had to borrow her sister's car to get here today to participate in this meeting. So this goes well and beyond. Her car is still locked in the garage at home. She's waiting for her
And my
husband.
sister's at my house.
And her sister's at her house, and her sister's car is in our parking lot. So, Marissa is, it's not just professionalism, it's dedication, it's commitment to seeing a job through till it's done. That's what's going to be the hardest part to fill when we seek replacement. I'll be able to find somebody that has financial skills, that has some municipal background. Whether or not we'll find somebody that works as hard and happily works as hard as her, that's a part that I'm going to struggle with. So thank you, Marissa. Thanks for your help.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Marissa. Can't thank you enough for your dedication, certainly from a FinCom perspective over the years. You will be missed, but we are very happy for you, and it sounds like a great opportunity for you. But we hope to not take advantage of reaching out to you with questions, but I we won't do that.
No, I think you're in pretty good shape. So I think that I think that the budget is 90% there, just a few tweaks here and there. So, and I know the budget pretty well. I have templates, and I've been showing Diane a lot of the information. So I think everything will go smoothly. Once again, thank you to all of you for all the support over the years.
Thank you, Marissa.
Thank you,
You will
Marissa.
be missed. You will be missed.
Yes.
Thank you.
While we're reassuring you all too about how good a shape we are in upstairs, I'll remind everybody that 4 or 5 years ago, before Marissa got here, you went 6 months without a finance director, and Diane basically carried the ball upstairs by herself during that 6 months. So, and as has been pointed out to me, not in an environment that was as well organized and prepared for that as now. Marissa leaves us in much better shape than you were when she got here, and Diane is therefore even better prepared to take over in the interim here while we're moving forward. So,
I couldn't agree more.
Me too.
All right, I think we've wrapped it up. It's that time of the meeting when I asked Darcy to say her cadence at the end of the meeting.
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
All right, second from the Board of Selectmen.
Second.
All right, and we'll do a roll call vote. Darcy?
Darcy Dale, aye.
Rosie?
Rosie Kennedy, aye.
Jamie?
Amy Knutson, aye.
Bill, I don't know if he's on anymore. I think he's out helping his wife shovel the car out so she can leave the garage. Myself, Sean Farrell, aye. And
I
we are
will
adjourned.
likewise entertain a motion for adjournment.
So
Move that
moved.
we adjourn?
Second,
All in favor?
No.
Ellen
Nick
McCormick,
Tenson, aye.
Christina Shank Hargrove, aye.
And John Prulidge, aye. We are adjourned.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very